the direction in which it goes, and also about the range of policy considerations that we have to complete in order to make this legislation real and material, and so that it exists alongside other things that people need in order to improve their well-being. But sir, I will start at the point of the language, because I think that one of the things, words matter, and one of the things that I am happy to associate myself, with which I'm happy to associate myself when it comes to this government and this Barbados Labour Party administration, is that we are meaningful in what we say. We are meaningful in our language, at least I assume that we intend to be and we aim to be. And so the member for St. Peter, not much of what I say today will surprise him, because most of what I say today I have said to him. Certainly, the fact that the choice was made to repeal the existing legislation and replace it is, I think, an indication that we have to step away from 1978. The fact that we had something called an Employment of Women Maternity Leave Act suggests to me that everything that we had to consider with respect to the employment of women could be encapsulated in maternity. So we called the legislation the Employment of Women Act, because all we cared about, it seems, at that time, in terms of women being in the workplace, was about their status, whether they were pregnant or non-pregnant. And so already, by rejecting this nomenclature, by setting it aside and saying, listen, employment of women relates to all kinds of things, not just their maternity and not just their reproductive roles. So that's the first indication, I think, that we're moving in the right direction. I would have hoped, though, that we had removed the use of the term confinement, which is a 19th century reference that really describes the experience of going into labor and delivery. And one of the reasons it was called at the time confinement is that at that time, for most of that century, men were excluded from the birthing room. Men were excluded from the birthing room even as medical practitioners. So in fact, men only came to be involved in labor and delivery as medical professionals when somebody decided that it was high science. All along, midwives were doing it, female relatives were doing it, were the ones delivering babies, because it was something that, oh, we shouldn't trouble men's sensibilities with this thing. All this baby business is not for men. So even doctors were not involved in delivery. But then somebody decided, you know what? This is important work. So get rid of the women from both here. Let's make midwifery secondary to medicine. And that was when men started to be involved in the delivery of babies. But men were not just excluded as medical practitioners, they were excluded as fathers. They were literally not allowed to witness the act of labor and delivery. And in fact, one had to clean up the child sufficiently that a man's delicate sensibilities could bear witness to this thing. So, I mean, I'm sure many of us have seen the videos of men fainting in the delivery room. A woman has just literally given birth herself, and poor him, he can't take on the sight of the event, right? But this is where the term confinement really came from, this notion that a woman had to be separated and kept away from real life and the real business of society while she was in the family way and while she was giving birth. And then it also came to be known as, to be associated with recovery, with which I have no objection, right? Because I do think it started to realize that women have a right to recuperate and recover, and that gave way, especially in Eastern practices, for family members to come over and help and make sure that the woman was resting and that there were other people who were playing this role. But I do think that it is important in our language not to use this delicate term to talk about things that we all need in order to reproduce our society. These questions today of social reproduction and of practical, literal, physical reproduction are everybody's business, because we cannot reproduce the society, the labor force, workers, students, scientists, doctors. We cannot reproduce these people if we did not make provisions for this reproduction in all its forms. So I do think that I would like to suggest that if we're talking about labor and delivery, let's talk about labor and delivery. If we're talking about pregnancy, let's call it pregnancy. Because the sooner we call these things what they are, the closer the society as a whole gets an understanding of what it takes to run a society. Let's not treat these things as delicate issues. So, sir, I certainly would be in favor of modernizing the language as we are modernizing the policy here today. But, sir, I also want to highlight that what we need to continue, as this legislation does, to promote is the idea of a life cycle approach to social care and social protection. And what do I mean by that? This legislation, and I'll talk briefly a little bit later about what are some of the things that recommend it. But this legislation focuses on, as it should, and is very progressive in the way that it focuses on sharing of care responsibility between mothers and fathers. And I am encouraged by the Honourable Member for St. Peter's disclosure today that future iterations or future development will include the addition of adopted children to families, so that we will then be extending family leave in cases where a family adopts a child. But, sir, there are so many other considerations when it comes to how a society reproduces itself and all of these stages of that. Sir, the issue is not so much, as we grapple with population issues, it's not just about the issue of pregnancy and delivery. It is about the question of fertility. It is about the question of fertility. The life cycle of a person, a woman who, so far to my knowledge, is the only one of us who can physically give birth. But that life cycle includes other things and other stages before we get to a live birth. And the fact is that there are all kinds of invisible parts of this fertility experience. And while this extension of maternity leave and inclusion of paternity leave are very important to support that, in general, policies that support fertility, policies that support the entire experience of families that are in the process of expanding themselves, those are the kinds of policies that are important. Sir, one of the stages, I would say, in a woman's life or in a family's life when it comes to reproduction is pregnancy loss. Now, there are many women who, before we all see and celebrate a child, who experience pregnancy loss. The UK, earlier this year, just a few weeks ago, introduced in their bereavement leave something called parental bereavement leave. So, standard in most legislation of this kind is that from 25 weeks, as the member who introduced the legislation outlined, from 25 weeks, it is considered a viable pregnancy. And if there is a stillbirth at that time, most jurisdictions still allow for maternity leave, but really you are looking at pregnancy and maternity from 25 weeks. And anything that happens up to 24 weeks is not even contemplated. But sir, most pregnancy loss happens in the first 12 weeks of gestation. And there is some pregnancy loss that also happens up to 24 weeks. And the fact is that while it does not result in a live birth, it is something that an employee has to deal with. As the Honourable Member said, it is not sickness or illness to the extent that it's a natural process. And so the question of how do we manage loss in families? How do we signal to employees, women, who are experiencing these issues, that they don't have to try and beg for an extra day or two to mourn the loss of their child or to deal with the physical recovery? Sir, I know from very recent personal experience of the difficulties that come when one experiences a pregnancy loss in one's family. And I know that it is not spoken about. It is one of the things that we feel that we either whisper about or we wonder about, and we don't talk about. But the fact is that a government, the state, must invest in the kinds of policies that support women's fertility at every stage, and also that support questions of infertility. How is it that we can help women who are in some other stage of their fertility journey? And this is not just about reproduction. This is not just about having a child, but this is about all the ways in which a woman is a woman. The Honourable Member who introduced the legislation talks a lot about things like breastfeeding in the workplace. And how do we make sure that women are supported in these kinds of reproductive activities? So, sir, what I would like to see alongside and along with this kind of legislation is legislation that, in an outright way, supports those of us who have experienced the loss of pregnancy and who may be in a fertility journey that really one does not want to discuss or submit documentation to be able to manage. And how do we introduce things like parental bereavement leave and other kinds of leave that help people in that journey? Sir, the legislation also really starts to open up some deeper issues about how we handle family law matters. Now, when it comes to the question of establishing paternity in the legislation, what the bill calls for is signed documentation from the mother stating that this man is the father of the child. Now, this is standard, I think, across our law. There are distinctions between how married people are treated and how others are treated. And so it is assumed that if I am married and I have a child, my married partner is the partner to whom I'm married is the father of the child, as it should rightly be assumed.
Honourable, that's a rebuttable presumption in law. That is what we call in law a rebuttable presumption.
Yes.
Yes, please.
That is what it is called in law.
That is correct terminology.
And in a case where there is a union other than marriage, then I have to prove certain things with respect to, well, not prove, but I certainly have to claim certain things. There's no assumptions being made, understandably, I suppose, but I still think it bears a second look to see whether this is really a kind of bifurcation of rights that is happening here. But we can come to that. I'm sure we'll get to that in other family law conversations, sir. But the point that I am trying to make here is that this legislation throws up some other considerations. And one of them has to do with the establishment of paternity. How do we as a society treat the establishment of paternity, which is really the legal claim of fatherhood? Now, we've seen, sirs, all kinds of scenarios where paternity is brought into question, and one might suggest that once and for all, there has to be a mechanism for the clear establishment of paternity. So, jurisdictions treat it in different ways, but it is certainly something that, alongside this legislation of this kind, and I'm not at all suggesting that this legislation should deal with that matter, but alongside legislation of this kind, these are the kinds of things that we have to explore. Sir, further to that, we have to do better on decisions related to custody and maintenance and dissolution of marriage. I have seen far, far, far too many scenarios within and outside of marriage, within common law unions, in visiting relationships, where families are not allowed to progress, children are not allowed to know their non-custodial parent because of at the discretion of a single person. These things cannot continue in a progressive Barbados. And often, these things are bound up in the dissolution of a marriage. And notwithstanding what the legislation says about how custody matters can be settled separately or property matters can be settled separately, I am not satisfied, sir, that we are giving children their best shot at knowing who their parents are, getting the full benefit of relationships with both parents, with both sides of the family, because the minister, the honourable member for St. Peter who introduced this legislation, left it at the point of encouraging parents too. He said, I would encourage parents not to, and I'm paraphrasing, to keep the children at the center of these conversations and, mediate. That would be good. Notwithstanding that, the court, the judicial system, has a role to play in situations where these matters come before the court. And I am not satisfied that when it comes to questions of family law, that the decisions are sufficiently timely. We are talking about, in many cases, about custody matters of children. So a child stops being a child at 18 years old. And so if at the point of a dissolution of a marriage, the child is 10, and there's no judgment for 7 or 8 years, well, that situation has ended. And this is not an anecdote, sir. This is something of which I have personal experience. That children now do not have the option to know the non-custodial parent because a court has failed to act in a timely way. It cannot continue, and I will go further. While we focus on criminal matters, while we focus on law reform with respect to criminal matters, I will say this, and the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, the Honourable Attorney General, said it in recent remarks in this honourable place, that there's only so far you can go on the law and order side of things when it comes to addressing crime. We seem to think that family law and how families function is separate from criminal activity and what is happening with criminal behavior in this country. They are not separate. And until we get that right, alongside all of the other measures that are being taken that are necessary, if we do not strengthen the entitlements that children have to be considered and to be included in the way in which the court functions and the family court functions and its efficiency, we are not in anything. Because a lot of what we are trying to solve begins and ends in the home. And so while we encourage family participation, sharing of care responsibility, we can't just do it with respect to measures like this. We have to be able to do it across the family law system, because there are children today who are suffering from not having access. And there are fathers or mothers who are likewise suffering from not having access. And, you know, sir, we talk about integrity, and we propose all kinds of codes of conduct and all kinds of things for those of us that sit in this honorable chamber. But those of us who sit in judgment, those of us who are judicial officers, those of us who are judges, those of us who have to make decisions that affect family, also have to be held to a standard of performance. And I am not satisfied that that standard of performance has been established and is being upheld with respect to family law matters. Sir, so beyond the establishment of paternity, which I think we have to be able to come to terms with, and there are all kinds of other things associated with this. So, for example, registration of births is another area that I think is low-hanging fruit. So this question of having to walk to the court and hold up the baby like this is Lion King and say, here is the baby, and here is the father, and is almost like you bring the father by the ears to come and say, look, this is him here. A woman who's married doesn't have to do that. She doesn't have to suffer that, well, what might be indignity depending on these circumstances. But sir, there's an easy solution for that, which is that the registration of a birth can happen at the hospital. The child is born at the hospital. And in fact, one of the suggestions that I made here today is that we get the father involved before it is time to distribute a benefit. Because in general, in the public health system in Barbados, a woman is registered with the public health system for antenatal classes, for antenatal care, and you can give her the option at that time to identify the father at that time when she presents herself to a polyclinic. No, I mean, there's nothing precluding her from saying at 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 15 weeks, this is the father. He's come willingly to be involved in birthing classes or whatever it is that are on offer, and understanding the process of pregnancy and postpartum and so on. There's nothing stopping that man, that father, from being registered in the system at that time. And in fact, if we really want to encourage Barbadians, men and women, to share care responsibilities, that would be the time to involve the father. So you say, okay, well, this woman is involved in antenatal care and classes and appointments, register the father then. And then, the birth, when it happens, if it happens, invariably in the public health system, it is happening at the Queen's Elizabeth Hospital. And so everything that you need to be able to register that birth is there. You have the father in the system. I'm not saying that we're going to have 100% uptake from the outset. We might have less than the 50% the honourable member quoted earlier. But at least it is an option. You have the father in the system. The birth certificate is generated. It is literally a certificate of birth. It is certifying that this child has been born here on this day. It happened right there in the hospital. Well, why would we go anywhere else to register the birth? No, you may need to transmit that information. I'm told no, it will be done by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. You may now need to transmit that information electronically, securely, from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on the same platform to the EBC. Then you have your registration of births and deaths. I do not know why we are requiring people to bring a newborn child and a hapless man, which is the way it's presented sometimes, to a court to say yes, and a woman who happens to have a ring on her finger is spared that. So, sir, these issues all hang together. One of the other, I did not hear, and perhaps I may have missed it, it was an expansive and quite thorough and useful presentation, but I did not hear reference to self-employed, the status of the self-employed in this legislation. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Peter is listening closely and may want in his wrap-up to reiterate, if he has already mentioned, how these benefits affect self-employed individuals. But there's another provision that obtains in some jurisdictions where the spousal maternity benefit of a man then attaches to his partner. So what it means, and I heard the Honourable Leader of the Opposition trying to come to terms with this issue of being employed 12 months. I will let the Honourable Member for St. Peter respond to that because he has endless time and I have limited time. But I heard him grappling with it as if it was some kind of alien idea when it is that provision exists across all legislation of this nature with varying thresholds for employment. But I won't speak too deeply to that, no. But one of the ways in which that is cured in some jurisdictions is that if I, the man, the father, have been employed at a firm for 5 years, and my partner, the mother, has just recently gained employment, the maternity benefit is a spousal maternity benefit. Remember, this is a family leave question. So my partner and I are having a child. And so I am entitled to a maternity benefit for a woman. I, as the father, can attach my maternity benefit to my partner. It happens in many insurance schemes, for example. And so if I've been employed for 5 years, and my partner has just started, the fact is that one of us has been employed for more than the stipulated time. And so she gets that benefit by proxy of me being the father. Now, I know perhaps better than most what the financial viability of the national insurance, sorry, I don't ever remember all the S's now, but the fund looks like. And so I know that some of the things that we explore in here today have to be costed and have to be proven to be financially viable. I understand that. But I do think that these are things, when it comes to parental bereavement leave for pregnancy loss and other kinds of loss, when it comes to the establishment of paternity, when it comes to spousal maternity benefits that attach through a man to his partner, that these are things that we have to explore in order to make sure that there are no gaps in coverage in the system. Sir, I think what I would like to say finally is that I am encouraged by what is represented here today. But I'm further encouraged by what has been outlined as the future direction for the consideration of family leave. One, that parents decide together who will take how much leave. And this is about more than just the delivery of care in the postpartum period. This is also about the income and the potential income losses from a woman being, as the member for St. Peter would like to say, confined, versus a man. So a couple may wish to be able to make a choice about who goes back to work earlier, because if I am earning at a higher level as the mother, then, buddy, you can stay home because you have money to make. So you stay home because you're earning at a lower level. I need to get back out there and keep this thing running so that we can continue to live our lives at the level to which we've all become accustomed. And so it is very important, I think, that we move quickly beyond this question of maternity and paternity leave to real, true family leave, so that this decision can be made between the couple and communicated to the authorities. I have to reiterate that as government has made certain pronouncements about things like fostering and expanding families in all kinds of ways, certainly for the question of adoption, bringing a new child into a home requires a period of adjustment, and it should be treated just like a maternity leave or a maternity benefit, because in many cases it requires even more of an adjustment. I've had recent personal experience with a friend who has brought a child from another culture, does not speak the language, does not understand how we are living as Barbadians, from miles and miles away, and now has to adjust and acclimatize, and time is needed for that to take place. And then finally, sir, the question of surrogacy. I don't know how this legislation is treating surrogacy, but I imagine that there will be a time in which we also bring the question of surrogacy into legislation, that we make sure that we acknowledge and include mothers who are giving birth on behalf of another family into the fabric of what keeps our society going. I am sure, as my mother would say, I'm most certain that I heard earlier references to acknowledging or making provisions for surrogate parenting to happen in our own jurisdiction here. And at such time as that happens, then this legislation will have to contemplate that and figure out where it fits, so that there will need to be a period of recuperation for the surrogate mother, even though she is not raising the child. And so there will also need to be a period where the custodial mother will need to come in, and that will also throw up some interesting provisions, I imagine, under this legislation. But sir, I am very encouraged that this is where we are today. I know that, as happens whenever new legislation is introduced or new ideas are tested, that people will have feelings and thoughts, and that is good. But I think that we have to move. We can't just sit and try to get everything perfect, especially in cases where the experimentation will not cause harm. Especially in cases where the experimentation will not cause harm. We're trying a new system. We are offering greater benefits than were there before. Now, would we like to be like Canada and stay home for a year with our children? Yes. But we cannot afford that at the moment. And arguably, perhaps Canada cannot either. And so when we consider questions of socialized health care, when we consider questions of social protection, we have to always be able to match it with affordability and financial viability. And in that framework, I believe that this legislation is pushing all of those boundaries, that this legislation goes to the very ends of what we have deemed we can afford and starts to make real progressive steps within the confines of what this government can afford today, what people have said they need, the co-occurring investment in parenting classes, some of the investments that we hear that we expect to be made in education from the Honourable Member for St. James North that he made this morning. This is what I call policy coherence. Now, we have to walk the walk, we have to do the fine work, we have to execute. All of that is a given. But sir, this legislation gives a clear signal, I feel, to Barbadians, to women, to men, to families, that this government supports each individual and their potential, and each family and what is needed in order to make sure that our society functions in a healthy way that supports people's well-being. And so with that, sir, I commend this bill, and I thank the Honourable Chamber for its time.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon, I rise and I start where the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, who just spoke, left off by stating that indeed I am encouraged by the presentation of the bill to this Honourable Chamber as presented by the Honourable Member for St. Peter earlier today. St. Peter, not St. Peter North, but St. Peter earlier today. This is a significant milestone, I believe, in the life of this Parliament, whereas legislators, we see it fit to introduce in a more comprehensive way a number of measures that will strengthen existing legislation. And by existing legislation, I refer specifically to the Employment of Women Act that was introduced and came into force about 3 weeks and 2 days before my birth in 1976. So for those who can do the math, you will understand, Mr. Speaker, I'm celebrating with my mother today, who, as we debate this bill in this honorable chamber, would have been among the first beneficiaries of maternity leave in Barbados. Well, I say celebrate with her, I'm celebrating. I don't know if she is. She may have some regrets. But I also celebrate in a very important way. The Honourable Member for St. Peter spoke about the labor movement. But permit me, Mr. Speaker, to single out the Barbados Workers Union. I celebrate with the Barbados Workers Union because I stand here very conscious of the fact that for the bill to be made into an act of Parliament in 1976, it came from very deliberate effort on the part of the Barbados Workers Union to first have maternity leave provisions introduced into collective agreements. And by doing so, and while the Barbados Workers Union through resolutions and advocacy would have sought over time to get maternity benefits into law, the first step was collective agreements, because the union would have sought to demonstrate to legislators and to the Parliament of the day, therefore, that there was a kind of appetite developing across the country that could entertain the kind of provisions that the employment of women made provision for. Well, of course, I heard the Honourable Member for St. Peter make mention of the fact that parties in government over time share certain democratic socialist principles. And while that is definitely the case, one must never underestimate the role that the trade union has played in influencing respective parties in government to adopt certain measures and to put them not only into policy, but have them inform legislation. It did so in 1976. The period between 1961 and 1976 was a period where we saw the development of a number of very useful pieces of labor legislation introduced in this country. We may have had iterations and amendments over time, but when one goes back to when legislation first came into force, that period was a very defining period. And it had less to do with the party that was in government at the time, and more to do with the influence that that party allowed itself to be subject to, and a lot of advocacy for the very useful legislation that there is in this country came about on account of the influence, the direct influence of the Barbados Workers Union to a party in government, whether that party was the Democratic Labour Party or whether that party is, as it currently is today, the Barbados Labour Party. So I celebrate with the Barbados Workers Union, and I take us back there because recognizing that that particular approach to whet the appetites and to sensitize the public and the world of work, or the space of work in Barbados, as to the importance of making provisions for the employment of women through maternity leave legislation, that same approach was adopted to paternity leave legislation, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter recognized earlier today as well, for at least the last 2 decades, where the union sought and successfully managed to get into collective agreement across many of its divisions, the particular provision. Of course, when we did it, we knew that there had to be an attempt to start somewhere so that those provisions in collective agreements would see agreement ranging from 5 working days up to 20 working days. And we had hoped that by the time legislation would come, that it would come making provision that even exceeded where we were able to maximize agreement at 20 days. But here we are, taking a very important baby step, Honourable Member, with 3 weeks provision for paternity leave, including under a bill that is introduced to this Honourable Chamber as the Family Leave Bill. Of course, making provision for more inclusive involvement of both man and woman in the early stages of rearing a child being brought into this world. The government is to be applauded, Mr. Speaker, because when we look across the region, we don't see many examples that we would have been able to draw from in making the kind of introductions that are provided for under this bill. In fact, I stand corrected, but I'm only aware of Jamaica that has some provision for paternity leave. They make provision for up to 20 working days, but that's for public sector male employees. Doesn't extend across the board. And there is the Dominican Republic that I am aware of that makes provision for 2 days paternity leave. So that if this legislation is to pass in this House and the other House, which I certainly hope and trust and have every belief that it will, it means that Barbados would be again leading in the region in a very important way by signaling its intent to have men be a part of a child's life in a significant way. And I don't say that, Mr. Speaker, in a way for us to tap ourselves on the back, although we should, and applaud ourselves and stay there, because I'm very well aware, as the Honourable Member who just spoke made mention of, that there are places like Canada, where I studied, that have the provision for 1 year. And that is something that when I did my master's in Canada, I was very excited about. But during that time, even as we looked at parental leave, which is what it is called, because it makes provision for both, we are calling it family leave. But as I looked at parental leave, what excited me was the fact that a mother could choose to take none of those days. In a lot of other pieces of legislation, there is some kind of baseline, some kind of floor that a mother must take and a father must take, and they can decide how they're going to split up the rest of the time. But in Canada, provision was made that a woman could take none or all, and conversely for the father. And why that was so, it was a very important part of the gender issues in business that had been emerging at the time and were under discussion. Where there was recognition, Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, that employment of women was taking on a new dimension, where the employment of women considered not only women fighting now to gain entry into the workforce, but women assuming some very senior positions in the workforce. Unfortunately, a number of those women, for reasons of competition, saw that they wouldn't, or considered that they didn't want to take maternity leave because they didn't want to see themselves having to reintegrate into a workplace and losing seniority and compete with the men at the same level. So maybe to their own detriment, or maybe not, because every woman's experience is different. They opted, some women, and there were a whole set of documentaries that we watched on women who opted to take only 2 days or to stay out for a week. Because when you have to be establishing yourself as a female and as being equal, let's face it, there are some things that we do to our own bodies and to our own selves to make the point that maybe if things were a lot more moderate, we shouldn't have to be making. But some women, for whatever reason, undertook that they didn't want the time. But of course, in those jurisdictions, we are way behind the ball because there were provisions for nursing stations, for child care, so a father could be seen taking the children down to the workplace for the mother to have her breastfeeding time. And even if not that, there was suitable provision for breast pumping stations and so on, and for freezing of breast milk in a safe way that women could do those things. So when provisions, when acts like this, when legislation like this, pieces of legislation are being contemplated, there's a wide berth of considerations that can be had. So I say that it is a statement of intent which I stand strongly in support of, but even in those introductory remarks that I made, one can see clearly where there is recognition that the steps taken today are steps that should be and must be improved on over time. I said that every woman's experience is different. I remember that when we were in the Structure of Works Committee for at the social partnership level, the specific committee that looked at framing improvements to the employment of women legislation. I remember sharing in common, and I'm not calling a name, but I remember sharing in common a position with she who heads the Employment Confederation, that maternity leave in Barbados at 12 weeks is really, really, really insufficient. But that's because in a very similar experience to mine, she had a wonderful pregnancy, but after birth, not complications, but some things that made managing oneself in the workplace a little challenging after birth. although not unhealthy, but some particular challenges that you go through where you know that your body definitely is not ready. And there's one thing that we committed to when we said we were going to make it a part of our advocacy. And yes, employers and workers could see eye to eye sometimes. Part of our advocacy to make improvements and significant improvements on the legislation. And today marks the first step. And I do believe that we will continue because we recognize that given the varied experiences of women, that there is more that needs to be done. I have some challenges with some aspects of the legislation and would wish to see, and I had the opportunity to comment on these before the legislation was brought here before the Parliament. But there's some things that at a particular time, for different reasons, we concede to agree to disagree on without being disagreeable. Nevertheless, there are some aspects that I still think there needs to be swift and further clarification on. One of those relates to Section 5, where I believe it is at 5.2. Paternity leave is granted to a father with a provision for a signed document for a woman. Although it goes on in the subsequent section to say that there are other things that an employer may consider reasonable at a time, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but there are other things that an employer may consider reasonable at the time, given the circumstance, instead of just simply taking a written note from the woman. I feel that 5.2 didn't need to be in at all. And I don't want to go into the possibilities that one may want to discuss, that one encounters in family court, where a woman might be vexed and decide she ain't signing a note because a man ain't gonna leave, and these kinds of things. I'm not going to go there, although that might be a practical scenario. But what I would make mention of, and I believe that is where the subsequent section says, given the situation, some other things may be considered. The reality is that a woman might not be in a position that she can sign that note. And so, because I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that there are some employers and some citizens who may understand well the intent of legislation, but who, in determining how they're going to apply the legislation, choose to leave broad approaches or support broad approaches on the basis of interpretation. I personally felt that requirement for a woman to sign a note should have been one that is struck out, because there are other ways of determining over time. So we established, yes, Honourable Member for St. Peter, that there, notwithstanding the note as a requirement, the signed document from a woman, that there are other things that can be considered. But I feel that generally those other things should have been put rather than leaving it to the discretion of the employer on the basis of available information. Another part that I see that we can move swiftly to address is that which relates to multiple births. Under the current bill before us, we have made improvement on maternity leave from 12 weeks to 14, and in the instance of multiple births, 17 weeks. But we note that there was no equal provision made for paternity leave if there are multiple births. And this is not a small concern. And it's not a small concern for those who have the experience of giving birth to a twin, or to a triplet, or more than that, whatever lets there are. Because when you have one child, sometimes coming out of childbirth, that is crying, and every experience is different, crying all the time, demanding your attention, your body is tired, and so on, that's one thing. But when you have two of them doing it and competing for attention, or three of them doing it, you really need a support system. And if we're really serious about and committed to ensuring that men who can identify as being the fathers and who can therefore claim, if we are really serious about men being part of the children's life in those formative years, in the same way we consider additional time for women for multiple births, we must not assume that it's the woman alone that will be able to manage this, especially in a time where there is the declining extended family support. And so a lot of responsibility falls on mother and father in this situation. So I think that that's another area that can be looked on in when we look to improve the soon-to-be passed act. I also think, Mr. Speaker, that the legislation could have gone a bit further in making provision for paternity leave to be deferred in instances where a child is ill. Under the current legislation, or with the current legislation in place when it comes into force, a father can take vacation, he can take paternity leave with 2 weeks taken during the first 3 months and the additional week taken at least in the next 3 months. So up to 6 months, you have to take this leave. But there are situations, and I had one of these situations, where the mother is healthy and ready to be discharged from hospital, but the child is not. And when that child is sick, it's not only the mother that's worrying and feeling it, but a father who's interested in having paternity leave anyhow, not for vacation, but for what paternity leave is intended to do, will similarly be concerned and mentally frustrated because you can't sleep, you can't eat. All you're studying and praying and hoping is that having carried this child to term, you can now bring it home out of hospital. And those are realities. So you will find that that man going in the workplace, and if he ain't got no vacation days left, or even if he has to take vacation, has to opt now to ensure or to convince an employer to give him time, because some of these situations aren't always planned for. Sometimes emergency births take place, and there are all those considerations. But he now has to go into a workplace and try to function and studying what's going on at the hospital. And even if the woman is discharged, I didn't leave, because they told the doctors we came here as a package and we leaving as one. So I was in a paid ward, fortunately, and whenever she was ready to leave, I would be ready to leave. But imagine a man that has to be considering what's going on with his child in an incubator, and what's going on with mental headspace that woman in, because he knows how he left her the morning going to work and so on. So I think that there is some amount of consideration if we recognize that men want to be involved and are involved, and we want to encourage them to be involved in the early stages as well, for extended provision in these kinds of circumstances. Now, I am not going to stand here and debate the 12-month provision that also existed as a requirement that needed to be satisfied before leave could be claimed for women, even on the maternity leave, from as far back as July 19, 1976, passed under a Democratic Labour Party in government. I'm not going to debate that, because I may have a view and I may have a wish that I would like to see that qualifying period being less. But when one is tasked with the responsibility of governing, there are a number of different considerations that have to be made beyond what one wants to see or would prefer to see. And one of those issues in the last 3 years, this country had to consider in a very serious way, and that's the sustainability of the National Insurance Fund. So if you cut a requirement because you recognize that there are certain people who may be disadvantaged and find themselves outside of that 12-month requirement, specifically those who have not been in stable employment, people who go from job to job to job, and there are a number of those people who won't find themselves for 12 months necessarily with one employer, or there are those people who are new to the workforce, who come into the workforce at 20, 19, whatever, they get pregnant, a woman gets pregnant and so on, might not be able to meet that 12-month threshold. And of course, there is the troublesome issue of people who are in precarious employment, who are not in formal employment, who are in contract employment. And some of these people employed by government and in contract employment, who would not therefore, if they are not paying NIS, qualify, still find themselves on the outside. So there are a whole range of issues when we look at qualification that must be considered. And I can come back to that, but as a segue, it is why, Mr. Speaker, even where government finds it necessary to have people employed on contract terms, because while trade unionists don't like to hear short-term contracts at all, they would like it abolished. But we recognize that there are instances where short-time employment, contract employment could make sense. But one of the things that we would like to see, or we should like to see for those of us who are considered with the sustainability of the NISS, Mr. Speaker, is that even where contracts are enforced, there should be some requirement. There should be some requirement for a person to, even if they have to sign a document or something, for their employer to pay over funds for them, for the NIS to be guaranteed that a person is going to be, that those payments, contributions, are going to be submitted. So it is a lot more difficult, I think, to convince the private sector en masse. But I would like to be a part of a government, Mr. Speaker, that sees where contract employment or workers are engaged on a contract level, that there is some agreement between that person and the government as employer to take those contributions out. It's for the person's well-being, and it is also in the interest of all of us for the sustainability of the fund, and it is easy to do. In the same way you got to sign off on different things for your contract, you could sign off on that provision. We've actually started to get it instituted into some statutory boards as an arrangement, and I think that it is a good practice and policy to be rolled out across all. But even recognizing that I segued, as I say certain things, I distract myself, Mr. Speaker, because I spoke about employers paying it over. But what about the niggling problem that we still have with employers who taking it out, but not paying it over? And the NISS has to find some way not to disadvantage a person. So when we examine bills like these, it opens our eyes and it opens up our memories to a number of the very troubling issues that must be confronted if legislation, as it is intended, while it is framed, is to hand down the benefit that it intends to the people who need it most. But before I distracted myself, I was speaking about the sustainability of the fund, and the 12-month eligibility. And if we try to open up wider than 12 months to ensure that we can incorporate more people into the net to benefit from both paternity and maternity leave, which is the subject of today. Mr. Speaker, we could very well be opening up a discussion about how much more contributions must be increased to make accommodation for these things. And that's a discussion that doesn't only concern parliamentarians, but it concerns the actual people that's supposed to be benefiting. These same mothers and fathers may find themselves having to pay more so that they can benefit more when the time comes. So that is a separate discussion, and for those who would want the time reduced and so on, must understand that you don't make decisions following a siloed approach. There are a very broad set of considerations that when you function even as trade unionists who commit to a mission of ensuring the well-being of all, that must be carefully measured and considered before you go agreeing to things willy-nilly or speaking off the cuff simply because you feel it should be so. There are a number of us that feel a lot of things. Today feel like birthdays should be a day of exemption, that you shouldn't have to come to work. But that simply is not the case. But anyhow, I continue. Then there's the residency requirement. One of the things that we have sought to do is to make sure a person who is regularly resident in Barbados has the opportunity as a regular resident in Barbados to benefit from the maternity benefit. But the question when I was considering this with the team arose around, what about a man whose partner is not regularly resident in Barbados, but who has fathered a child? How would he be able to get paternity leave and not have to rely on vacation so that he can go overseas and be part of that child's early development? And I wonder, therefore, recognizing that there may be gaps, not in the legislation, but in our own understanding, if the Honourable Member for St. Peter in his wrap-up could address that, whether it is something that is there, provision is there, and if the provision is not there, we hope that it will be something that is worthy of good consideration, because the aim of the legislation seeks in a very comprehensive manner to offer both mother and father the opportunity to be as involved as they can be in those very early days following the child's birth. So we have we have provisions, in the bill before us for paternity leave to be extended by 3 weeks in the case of the death of the mother. And we hope that this provision will not be one that has to be considered for many men, but things happen. One of the things that I think we could make progress on and show some progressive attitude towards, recognizing that a mother is entitled, when this bill passes, to 14 weeks and 17 weeks for multiple births, if instead of just considering 3 weeks additional, there's some further consideration for the father, if he's still alive and known and involved, to have the full extent of the maternity benefit that the mother would have had. Because the 14 weeks isn't only for breastfeeding and body recovering and so on. It's not natural. We've heard or let me put it this way, it's more natural for a woman to be involved in early child care and so on. But if a mother is absent, that's all the more reason that a father needs more time, because he now has to adjust to figuring out that role in the absence of a mother. And he has to be now the primary person involved in that child's life in many cases, and in an increasing number of cases.
You want to remind me, it's your birthday? You have 2 more minutes.
Thank you. So in wrapping up, Mr. Speaker, those are the kind of things that I think that would give a lot more meaning to the family leave bill before us. And certainly as we move towards not thinking that we have arrived, but as we go into further discussions to see how we can make parental leave a reality in this country, I think that these are very useful considerations that can form a body of considerations for progression. And I think that it won't come, many of them, at too high a cost. So, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I do support the call from the member, the honorable member from St. Michael South Central as well for adoption leave. And I am aware that the same trade union that advocated effectively for maternity leave and now paternity leave to be included, the Barbados Workers Union has started the process of rolling out in some of our agreements, getting into some of our agreement frame, and I congratulate the first 5 employers that we have for agreeing with us on the importance of adoption leave. And I hope that it wouldn't be too long before very good consideration is made for expanding parental leave to include what now are not even unique situations, but situations that are very commonplace in our society. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I thank you for entertaining a birthday girl, and I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support the bill that is before this House, Mr. Speaker, sir. Before I do, though, I feel inclined to take the Parliament where my mind has taken me in relation to my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and a lot of the work that he has brought to this Parliament will go down perhaps as the most transformative pieces of legislation and policies and other work that has ever been done by a Ministry of Labour in this country. And, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Labour is not the kind of ministry that is known to be a sexy, permit me to say, ministry. You don't see the works on the road. You don't build houses in the Ministry of Labour. You don't give social care benefits in the Ministry of Labour. But it has shown itself to be one of the most important ministries. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, I was remarking to the Honourable Member for St. Peter that in pieces of his legislation, and we went over a few, including the National Insurance and Social Security Act, including the bill that spoke to discrimination and employment, the employment bill, sir, the minimum wage legislation, the labor clauses bill, sir, just pieces of legislation, all of which I think are transformative pieces of legislation. And the member who spoke before me, I'm sure she would be very satisfied with a lot of the work that came out of the Ministry of Labor. I commend the minister, I commend the minister, I commend the team, sir, for the brilliant work that has come out of that ministry. And this, sir, is a continuation of that work. Mr. Speaker, sir, I always, sir, must remind myself that for those of us who have the privilege to be here, we do so, sir, for 50, 60 years to come. And that there are going to be generations that will look back on this Parliament, sir, and ask us if we wasted our time while we were here. I have the responsibility for family now, Mr. Speaker, sir, in this ministry, but of course there are many ministries that address issues pertaining to family. And we would accept, sir, that there's no society that can consider itself strong where the families are not being able to hold themselves together. I say so as a starting point only, Mr. Speaker, because in preparing the Social Empowerment Agency, one of the conversations that has left me most scarred, and perhaps has been most instructive, is that the persons for whom we were trying to build an effective social service system felt that the word family and that family in all of its manifestations did not pass on the things that we think a family should. And in fact, family was the instrument of the most hurt and the most pain. And that we must be deliberate, sir. We must be unrelenting, and we must be determined to help rebuild families in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I locate this bill in that fight. The fight that we must all make, sir, to be able to rebuild families in this country, Mr. Speaker. So when families are strong, our children are strong. And when our children are strong, sir, our nation is strong, sir. We know that a child that is raised in a family setting, sir, that is secure, would be more confident. Sir, when the family is fractured, when care is inconsistent, those effects ripple throughout, sir. And that when a father is present, sir, from the time a child sheds a tear at night, sir, or worse yet, the manifestations that we are seeing now on our streets, sir, with guns, when a father is present, sir, we get to help shape that, sir, in a positive way. I commend the bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I see it in that light and in that context, sir. It's about giving families the space, the security, and the protection that they need, sir, to be able to do that most critical work at a most critical time in a child's life, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think this speaks to the heart of our country. And it is difficult for me, sir, to carry both social services and crime and not see this bill as being part of that, Mr. Speaker, sir. A few weeks ago, when I was in my constituency office in Bridensill, there's a young man who passed. He used to pass with his pregnant girlfriend. And now they have a child. And he passed carrying the child, and I spoke to him, and we had a little conversation. But he remarked that he had to go back to work, and that while the child was smiling for the first time, he was pouring concrete. Mr. Speaker, I feel that for him and for the thousands of young men in this country who are fathering children, we have seen a deliberate effect and effort by men to play a greater role in their child's lives, Mr. Speaker, sir. When I was young, I hardly saw a man with a child when I was young. In the community where I grew up, sir, none of my friends who lived in my immediate community lived with their father. None of them. And on top of the hill, sir, in Wildy Gardens, where my friends came to play with me, they lived with their father. But in the Pine, sir, in my immediate vicinity, not one of us lived with our father, sir. We may think that we turned out well. Somebody may say, Kurt, look how you turned out. It doesn't matter, sir. These things scar people for life, Mr. Speaker, sir. I am not foolish enough to think that because I stand here that I am not wounded and walking wounded too. And that we have, as the society has evolved on its own without parliamentary intervention, the society has evolved on its own to allow men to play a greater role, sir. And I commend the Honourable Member for St. Peter for recognizing that, sir, and for putting it into law and allowing men to play a role in the lives of their children, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Prime Minister and I had a conversation. I don't know if she would want me to say this, but when I was having a conversation with her, and she remarked to me that having access to her father helped to shape her, sir. Access. I'm not talking about living in the same house. You don't have to be a couple, but having access to a father, sir, makes a significant difference in the lives of a child, Mr. Speaker, sir. Again, I see that bill, this bill in that context, Mr. Speaker, sir. We argue that in the past, that Barbados lived by the old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. But somewhere along the line, we stopped giving parents the opportunity to be part of that village. People have to hustle. People have to be running from job to job. Men have to work. Women have to work, Mr. Speaker, sir. We stopped giving people the opportunity to be part of that village. And I know, sir, that we have, when we were discussing crime again, we spoke about how does a country and a state build social capital. Recognizing that the institutions that we trusted, the church, the family, the school, all those institutions have become weaker somehow over time. What role must the state now play to be able to fill that gap if we are able to survive as a country? And by putting this in place, sir, we are strengthening and creating that social capital that allows the state to be involved, sir, in doing what has no longer been an organic thing in relation to being able to learn values and ways of behavior through our institutions, Mr. Speaker, sir. I see this bill as a return to ourselves, as a return to that which is entirely and distinctly Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, sir, anyone who deals with children, and I always, when I get to these points, I have no choice but to laugh, because I feel that as long as you are in this chair, when I speak about children, I feel as if I'm speaking to my teacher, because you've been in this role much longer than me, having had the job at the child care board that I took immediately after you, and as a social worker dealing with children. So I speak to you, sir, but through you to Barbados and to the Parliament. But you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that a child who has the opportunity to be raised, and when I say a stable household, I'm not lashing on to the old conventional things that a man and a woman must be living in a big house with a white fence, but getting along, at least. The opportunity to live in a household or to live in a loving household where the child feels love, sir, it has implications throughout. And let us be clear, if you are not present, you cannot extend love, but love does not extend itself, sir, beyond and overseas if you've never had a relationship with a child. When I asked, sir, for men, and I did it a few years ago in this place, for men to either play a greater role or in some cases to be allowed to play a greater role, is because, sir, I knew and I know what this country needs, Mr. Speaker, sir. We need, considering our dwindling population, sir, you heard from the Honourable Minister of Education how children are falling and falling, the numbers are falling, sir. And the ones that are left, sir, we have to do everything to safeguard them. That is what the Child Protection Bill was. That is what the Child Justice Bill that the Honourable Minister responsible for Home Affairs brought to this House, sir. That is what that was, Mr. Speaker, sir. I see this bill only in that context. And I could get into what we know of health and how a child that is raised, sir, where parents care about that child, sir, is less likely to have health complications. Check any study from the World Health Organization, sir, and how they link parental presence to what occurs, especially in the early days of a child. Alone, I think it was the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central who spoke about breastfeeding. Sir, you encourage a mother to breastfeed, sir. We encourage it as a government. Sir, permit me to say Dr. Bernard, who's been leading a lot of work in breastfeeding. Sir, we know that this is important and that helps the child, sir. It reduces obesity in later years, sir. If a parent is present, sir, and when I say present, I don't just mean physically, because there's some households where two people live in the house and that one of them ain't present at all. I was playing my 5-year-old the other day, sir. Well, she was playing with me. If I'm being honest, I was distracted. And then she looked at me with such sad and she said, "Daddy, put down the phone." I had not even realized, even as I'm here lecturing people, pretending, sir, to be engaged, sir, but I also had things to finish. So I talking and I on my phone talking to my PS. Mr. Speaker, sir, she said, "Daddy, put down the phone." I felt so terrible, just the way she looked at me, Mr. Speaker, sir. I am already guilty because most of us, people don't appreciate what we do, but most of us don't get to spend time with our children, Mr. Speaker, sir. We spend so much time doing other things, we hardly get time to spend with our family. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are many health benefits. I won't get into all of them, Mr. Speaker, sir. But we also know that the life chances are better. We know that the chance that that family will fall into poverty, sir, is lower. We also know that the probability that that child will start using illegal substances is also lower. The benefits, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm talking about where that relationship is a healthy one. We know, sir, that you're less likely to find yourself in the justice system where a male is present in the household, or where a male is present in the child's life, more accurately, Mr. Speaker, sir. The U.S. Department of Justice found that boys raised without fathers are twice as likely to end up in prison, Mr. Speaker, sir. So this is important work, and we cannot separate this bill. So the problem is that Barbadians don't see things in totality. And perhaps if we have a deficit as a government, it is that we have not been able to bring it all together so that when we give it to Barbados, they can see it in its entire package. But Mr. Speaker, sir, we are doing this for the family, for the country, sir, and for the future, Mr. Speaker, sir. It would be very difficult, as I said, to talk about this and not talk about gun violence, Mr. Speaker, sir. We were recently in Chicago, Mr. Speaker, and in Chicago, where they were dealing with CRED is the organization that was dealing with a lot of the gun violence on the street. When we spoke to those young men, and we had a room full of young men, sir, as they went around the room, these boys are 20, 19. The oldest was probably like 22. As we went around the room asking them about their experience, the Attorney General and myself and a few others, all of them except two had no relationship whatsoever with their father. And the two who had a relationship with their father, one, the father, he said his father taught him one thing, which was how to sell drugs. And then the other father, when the mother said, do right, the father would say, do wrong. So that the absence of a father is detrimental. But the presence of a misleading father is also detrimental. And I say that because I know that we are going to have to work, and the country doesn't want to hear it all the time, but we are going to have to work with these same young men, sir, who are on the street. Because if I am trying to help the children, but the fathers of these children, when the mother, in that case, is saying go right, the fathers are saying go wrong, Mr. Speaker, sir, who do you think they're listening to? We have to make sure, sir, that even if we lose those men, that we can help them to keep their children safe, Mr. Speaker. That's the conversation that this country must become mature enough to have, Mr. Speaker. I fear that if we leave these children alone, sir, as I said, a father's absence is detrimental, but the presence of a father who is misleading the children is even more detrimental. And that we have to work with those fathers, sir, to make sure that when the children come into this world, they didn't ask to be here, that we can give them the best of what Barbados has to offer, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that we have too many families that are trying to survive, sir, with one parent, stretched. You know, at back to school time, you walk around this parliament, sir, you know, at back to school time, 90% of the people who come to see us or more are women. It's the women, Mr. Speaker. They come, when back to school time comes, it's the parents. The child has two parents, but it's normally the woman who's showing up asking for support. We have to do a lot of work in that space, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm happy to see that men are stepping up. I'm thrilled to know that the state is making it easier for them to have access for leave, sir. But that I believe we also have to say to men, you know, you have a responsibility to yourself, to your family, to your children, and to this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. Back to school time is almost a woman time. Graduation time, you look into the audience, the vast majority of the parents who are there are also the women, Mr. Speaker. It's a fact. I mean, you look into the audience, you know, I commend the men when I see them, because I know that when a man is present in a supportive, positive way, that makes a lot of difference to the child, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it's in that context, again, that I would want to be able to speak on this, Mr. Speaker, sir. We cannot wait till a child is 14 years old to try to break it and break the trauma. This bill allows the parent to be there before the child is even 14 days old, the father. And to me, sir, this is going to be something that's going to give Barbados benefit for a long, long, long time to come. I don't believe, sir, that the Honourable Member for St. Peter gets his flowers enough. And I don't need to praise him. I suspect, I heard the Honourable Leader of the Opposition say that you pat yourself on the back. This is not about patting ourselves on the back. This is necessary work. And the truth is that a lot of these social things that we've done, a lot of the work that we have done, sir, in the social sector space, sir, is necessary work that was not done. It is remarkable to me that the opposition still tries to claim advantage on social issues, that they throw their minds back to a time of Earl Barrow, no matter what time or what we are debating, Mr. Speaker, sir, but what has been brought to this House through the Honourable Member for St. Peter is transformative, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it is going to be to the benefit of Barbados for a long, long, long time. Sorry, I had examples, you know, he liked to speak about Norway. I had examples from Norway, sir, from Japan. A lot of work to show that this will make a big difference in the lives of children. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will not even get into all of that. On the bill itself, Mr. Speaker, sir, I see this bill on 3 pillars. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, sir, I see it as protecting families. Because this bill is not only about introducing paternity leave, it is also about strengthening the maternity protections, Mr. Speaker. And I am very glad because, like most of us in this place, I was raised by a very strong woman. My father visited. I love him dearly, but at the end of the day, my mother raised me. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I am happy to see that this bill, sir, does things for women, Mr. Speaker, sir. Allows them a greater bit of leave, Mr. Speaker, sir. We know that they carry a lot of work. So 12 weeks we've always felt was not enough, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I'm happy to see that we've corrected it. You know, if we have gone from 12 to 15, some people would say you need to do 17. If you've gone to 20, there will be some people who are saying there's some countries that do 3 months. There's some countries that do more. Exactly, there's some countries that give you a year. Mr. Speaker, sir, Barbados is but a struggling little economy, sir, and in the context of what we can do, I believe the country and this government has done extremely well, Mr. Speaker, sir. But it extends maternity leave to 14 weeks for a single birth and 17 weeks for multiple births, Mr. Speaker, sir, giving mothers more time to heal. I was saying to the honourable member today, I particularly like the 6 weeks extension in the case that the child or that the mother needs a little bit more time. And the honourable member for St. Peter explained it very well, and I don't need to go over it. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the extension allows you so that you don't have to, while you're home with your child and you're sick, you don't have to take it out that time. That to me, sir, is a wonderful addition to the conversation, Mr. Speaker, sir. I would not get into the conversation on confinement. I had a note. The honourable member for St. Michael's South Central took that away from me. I'm not saying that. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, in relation to point 2 in child protection, we brought child protection legislation. We brought a child justice bill. We strengthened education. The honourable member for St. John every month bringing some policy or something to help young people, Mr. Speaker, sir. The member for St. James South, no, I do not know anybody who is interested in more training for young people, sir. Every time there's a conversation around training, let's do this training. I want to offer this training, Mr. Speaker, sir. There is no doubt in my mind that when we put the whole package together, and I say this again, perhaps we have to do that work, put it all together, so people can see, Mr. Speaker, sir, and that work, sir, in terms of protecting children is going to be crucial and critical. Crucial. Yeah. Leave can be taken during the crucial first 6 months, allowing parents to be present when it matters most, Mr. Speaker, sir. And the evidence from across the world in Canada and in Finland bear this out to be true. And Mr. Speaker, sir, empowering fathers. Mr. Speaker, I believe, sir, that this bill, for the first time in our history, give a right. It is not a privilege. It is not an option. Nobody can decide, you're a father, have a 2-day. Because that's what happens in the real world, you know. You just get a child, man, take a day off. You get 2 days off. No longer that, sir. This is now your right, Mr. Speaker, sir. And this is in addition to the holiday, your annual holiday. You don't lose it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if the mother passes away during or after childbirth, shortly after, the father is granted an additional 3 weeks, Mr. Speaker, sir. This protects fathers from dismissal, loss of seniority, or discrimination for taking leave. So in addition to giving leave, sir, we protect the fathers as well, Mr. Speaker. I think that this bill will go down in history for men as a most transformative bill. This is perhaps the most historic piece of legislation for men, sir. And I'm also minister responsible for gender affairs, so this is going to be one of those things, sir, for men, sir, that when we go to speak about what Barbados has done in gender-related matters, this is going to be one of those things. You know, the other thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition needs to spend half an hour explaining the difference between sex and gender, trying to explain the difference between sex and gender to this parliament. And I don't know that anybody in here needs sociology 101. But it gave him 30 more minutes of time. but I don't think it was meant to convey anything because, again, no link was even made to the legislation. It is a most fascinating thing, Mr. Speaker, sir. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill also allows for enforcement, and I think that we pass a lot of laws sometimes. We don't get to implement them as we should, and I don't mean this government, I mean governments in this country, in the region, and in the world. And that the enforcements that are built into this bill, sir, the $50,000 fine, the $10,000 fine for employees, sir, the Chief Labor Officer is responsible for overseeing the implementation of the legislation and its protections, therefore should be real and not just on paper. And we have to hold the Chief Labor Officer accountable, sir, for these things to make sure, if that is what is written here, sir, we have to hold somebody accountable. I will not speak and say that this bill is transformative and that this bill is going to make a big difference if the person who's now responsible for implementing it drop the ball. The Chief Labor Officer must know that this is no poo-poo piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir. So there are a few things, Mr. Speaker, sir, in real terms that I also feel that I should mention very quickly. I know that whenever we pass legislation, we passed the minimum wage bill in here, the Honourable Member came back and amended it. As soon as we amended the minimum wage, many employers, not all, but many were up in arms. It's going to cost too much. If you increase minimum wage, I have to raise my prices. If this, then that. It's like this automatic computer programming, you know, ones and zeros. If this, then that. Like there's no negotiating in between there, no mental capacity to make adjustment. So if you bring a bill that allows paternity leave, some people are going to suggest that it's going to cost. I know, Mr. Speaker, having been involved in HR, that you are more likely to retain employees where employees feel that they have a sense of worth in the organization that they're working with. But if that is not a convincing argument, I know that the cost of having to retrain an employee, the cost of turnover and having to train a new employee is going to be a heck of a lot more than the cost of the leave. So employers can choose, if they wish, to take that position that this costs too much, but then when they have to go and get new employees and train them up and prepare them, sir, that costs more. I also know, Mr. Speaker, sir, when I look at this bill, sir, that we speak of the employee, sir, being able to report, sir, I feel that those processes have to be very clearly defined. Employees, sir, by their very nature, are timid. And you must be because, in a way, your hand is down the mouth of the lion. You go and you report your employer or something for a breach, you feel afraid that you will lose your job. I feel that we have to make it very clear what the processes are, sir. We have to be clear in our advertising. We have to engage employers. We have to just make it very clear. And not only very clear, we have to make it very easy for employees to be able to do these reports if they have to report a breach. We have to give them the security, sir. You know, they say justice should not only be done, but it must seem to be done, sir. Where people breach, sir, we have to hold people accountable, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also feel when we speak, sir, of the new legislation, sir, I know our society is changing, how single fathers and guardians are able to access the child grant. Just be clear. I'm not saying that it's not discussed, but just be clear so that there's no gray area for people when they come before the ministry, sir, trying to get access to these things, Mr. Speaker, sir. And with those few things, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe that we have a piece of legislation of which we can feel extremely proud. You know, Mr. Speaker, sir, when I was canvassing, and I close on this, when I was canvassing in St. Michael South, when I first started canvassing, I'd ask my persons who would walk with me, where do you see yourself 7 years from now? If you act as an individual, only concerned about the immediacy of your action, if you act only in the now, so that has limits. Where do you see yourself 7 years from now? If your behavior today is not aligning itself with what you expect for yourself, from yourself, 7 years from now, then change your behavior. If, sir, I look to Barbados, sir, and the truth is, on the trajectory that we were on, there were a lot of red flags for this country. If, Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot correct our behavior now, and say to ourselves that this will reap benefit for us 50 years from now, 60 years from now, then we are not in the right business, and none of us should be in this place. But if it is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we look at our actions, and we say to ourselves that our actions, sir, will extend themselves not only into this moment, sir, but well into the future, and echo into history, and into the lives of the children that we claim to love, Mr. Speaker, sir, then we are doing the right thing. It is in the context, sir, that I see this bill. This bill that the Honourable Member for St. Peter brought is about child protection. It is about family protection, sir. It is about protecting the nation, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it is about every single Barbadian child that is born in this country, Mr. Speaker. It will go down, and I brought bills to this house too, so I'm not saying this lightly. This will go down as one of the most historic pieces of legislation to grace this parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we could get here and nitpick. I don't even want to respond. I believe you remember St. Peterville. We could get and nitpick for an hour. For an hour. On nonsense. But, you know, I'll leave that to you. I remember for St. Peter. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we give the children, when we give the parents the time and the space and the security to care for their children, sir, we are not only protecting families, sir, we are building a nation. We promised Barbados, sir, in our Manifesto of Hope. What's the proper name?
Manifesto of Hope.
The Hope.
Covenant of Hope.
In our Covenant of Hope, Mr. Speaker, sir. Before we became the governor, in our Covenant of Hope, we established who we were. Yeah. We said exactly what we were going to do. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is going to be a day when I will have to honestly say to myself that perhaps we've diverted somewhat from what we said. Today is not that day. In fact, today is a day where I know that those things that we set out to do when we, sir, were filled with inspiration and ambition, sir, those things, sir, this bill aligns perfectly with those things, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is why we said it in our Covenant of Hope. Yeah. This is essentially who we are as a nation, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those few words, I believe that we are now putting a legacy into law. And thank you, sir.
Honourable Member Christchurch, West Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I first of all want to associate myself closely with this piece of legislation. I didn't want to say it because coming off on the heels of a festive season where the new Pickety Cock, Calypso King would tell us, don't wait, give him the flowers now. I want to say that the Member of Parliament for St. Peter North, South, East, and West, is deserving of his flowers. And I think that this piece of legislation that he has brought to this chamber is equally deserving of all the flowers in the world, because it seeks to transform that which we believe from the inception was in opposition to our guiding principles as a party, and as the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, who spoke before me, alluded to, as was invested in the Covenant of Hope. Mr. Speaker, sir, a bill that speaks to the fact that as of the next couple of weeks, when it is passed, hopefully in both chambers, a bill that would allow fathers for the first time in the history of Barbados to have a paternity leave, so that they could do which we know is essential for the development of their children, and to extend, of course, the maternity leave from 12 to 15 weeks for parents, for mothers, and to even extend it further, 12 to 14 weeks, sorry, and to 17 weeks for multiple births. This is breakthrough legislation by any stretch of imagination. I want to say that the importance of having this close connection to the child at birth must never be underestimated, not only for its psychosocial developmental reasons, but of course, research is there medically to suggest that there are physiological and physiochemical benefits to having that child immediately after birth, to have that close skin-to-skin connection. Some doctors may refer to it as the eye contact, the initial eye contact with the child. The importance of that with a father must never be underestimated. The fact that research has shown that there are certain increases in oxytocin levels, increases in certain hormonal levels with that close association that speaks to love and care and the balance of humors. Those types of things are associated in a physiochemical way when there is that close connection to a child and that relationship at birth. So there is a lot of research to suggest that the importance of this exercise is critical to the development of the child in later life. And equal to this is how we treat those children, those babies, in terms of providing an environment that is nutritionally safe as well. It is the responsibility of parents, both mothers and fathers, when we talk about family leave legislation, to spend that initial moment and that time with the child to ensure that we are able to take care of not only the psychosocial needs, but the health and nutritional needs of that child from the inception. And this is an important part of the conversation. How we will ensure that the child gets the nutritional benefit that it deserves from a young age in terms of development, physiologically and anatomically. How we are going to ensure that that child is looked after. And the initial conversations with the child is one that will bring a balance to that child's life, because it is that the foundation that we lay in terms of parenting that will pretty much determine the outcome of that child in his impressionable years. And the Member of Parliament of St. Michael Southport to those years and the challenges that he is having as crime prevention minister as it relates to those people, those young people who are showing maladaptive patterns of behavior. I am saying that this legislation speaks to the fact that when the parents are not entitled to the benefits of family leave, that the legislation also speaks to the fact that there will be a grant to help support these children, because we recognize the importance of ensuring the survival of those in the dawn of their lives. We understand the importance of having that framework, that network, that protective layer for those children, because every single thing that happens in their life will pretty much determine the outcome in the next 20, 30, 40 years, and when they are expected to give a contribution to the building of this country. This is an important piece of legislation. I want to say that the minister also in the legislation alluded to the fact that even self-employed persons, once they are paying their benefits, can even apply for the family leave and to be entitled to get all the provisions of this legislation. This is a breakthrough moment. This is the new deal for families in Barbados, and it is the building of families, because a house cannot be a home unless there is love, there's connection, there is a family that exists on the basis of development, love, care, and all the basic tenets. This is an important piece of legislation. And Mr. Speaker, the care of a child goes further than saying, I love you on morning. It goes further than providing a home, a house with a roof, making sure that there's a TV available and all the amenities. It goes further than that. The child will be guided by the actions of the parents. If the child is exposed to an environment where there is rancor in the household, that would influence the child's behavior. And it's from a young age that children are able to sense, based on the release of certain hormones and endorphins, you name it. They're able to sense certain energies and behaviors even from parents. So it's incumbent on parents to be able to exercise in the household that love and care and that balance of humors that are expected to help in the child's development. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, equal to that, because I spoke about the parents having the nutritional support for the child and to be able to allow that child to have the nutritional balance so it can develop to become the adults that we know that they can become to help grow this country. Mr. Speaker, there is a damning concern for me, and I want to take the opportunity to speak to it. And this is because in the same way we are expecting and we are encouraging parents to be good parents and to do all those things, provide love, care, ensure that there are nutritional avenues for the child. Equal to that is the fact that the environment must be one which allows for the child to grow up with love and care and etc. But the antithesis of this, Mr. Speaker, is what you want to look at. When you raise a child in an environment that is not conducive for love, care, for the balance of humors, an environment where you expose the child because of your inadvertent behaviors to drug use. And this is something that is very scary for me, especially a person who would have practiced pharmacy for the better part of 30 years or so, and having to deal with incidents of drug use even in young teenagers. I want to say that we have to be mindful of our actions, both parents, and what we do around our child, so that they will be provided with an environment that is devoid of any potential drug and exposure to drugs. Oftentimes, we know it because we operate in constituencies. There are parents who would smoke in the same environment as a child, whether it is a newborn child or a child a couple months old. And the side stream smoke will be exposed to that child, that young, impressionable child, who is now developing anatomically and physiologically. We know the adverse effects of this behavior. Parents may go and drink alcohol in the presence of that child. The same environment, same room. We know the volatility of alcohol and alcoholic beverages. It can turn from a liquid to a gaseous form, and we understand the smells can go across the room. The same room that the child is in. So, equal to the task of providing love and care, we have to be mindful not only of the nutritional component as it relates to the care of the child, but we have to make sure that the environment is one that is safe and devoid of any potential drug exposure. And that's why I'm appealing to parents now, especially those ones that we are talking about in the family leave bill, to be cognizant of their activities, especially when it comes to drug use. Be cognizant because the deleterious effects on the child are well documented. And we know the problems that we are having in society with children and drug use. It is a big problem. The National Council on Substance Abuse put out a report the other day. And I saw in the report that there were about 93 students tested at the Nichols Center, and about 30 of them, about a third or so, tested positive for marijuana along with other drugs, whether alcohol. or in combination. There were studies done back in the year 2012 which suggested that over 50% of persons under the age of 16 years experimented with some form of drug or the other. Alcohol being the leading one at the time. So it is real. But we have not only a situation where there's the smoking of marijuana, for instance, but now steps the polydrug use. That is a big concern for us in the country. And this is where the parents now, even from this little age, must ensure that we are not doing anything that would stimulate and cause the use, the dependent use of these products, even in latter years of life. A very important conversation we must have, because it is our behavior, maybe inadvertent, that can stimulate the thirst, the quenching the thirst for drug use in children. We may not be aware. We may live in a house that is near to a neighbor who, for some reason, may be smoking, may be using all types of drugs, and our children are inadvertently exposed to them. And this is the danger now of having an environment where the child and the rights of the child are not protected. And as I said before, we have a damning concern right now with the polydrug use in this country, where young people are using some strange combinations in order to get the thrill and the hype that they are exposed to. The combinations of marijuana, lean, ecstasy, and fentanyl, along with prescribed drugs that they are taking. And these combinations, when taken, Mr. Speaker, sir, are causing all types of effects in our society. Persons committing all sorts of crimes and not even being aware that they're doing what they did previously. We have situations where, because of this polydrug use, the effects on the systems, the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the brain, the hormonal systems, the reproductive systems, the effects are adverse and dangerous. And that is why parents must ensure that they start looking for what they call the salient signs. Your child start bringing home the Jolly Ranchers. Not before. All of a sudden they're interested in these sweeties. Then, without having a cough, you see now with these different types of cough syrups, Tuscaloosa, Lintus, codeine, Lintus, etc. These are signs that parents must be able to look for. And then there's this fright that they're mixing the different things together. The Prime Minister, the Member of Parliament for St. Michael North spoke about Northeast, spoke about the fact that their children are walking around. They call it lean after they don't drink it because they're lean on the side. It's part of the anatomical effects of these products. But it's the combinations. And I am saying that parents must be able to look for those things, but we must not equally contribute. So it's our practices in the household that I'm saying that we need to be cognizant of, especially when it relates to drug use. Because all these things can alter and affect and bring about a dependency even at a young age in these children, so that there is a thirst for that which they were exposed to, maybe inadvertently by their parent. So we have a new task as parents to ensure that our charges are not exposed to these drugs that can cause harmful effects, not only in the body, but cause them to do things that they may not associate with themselves with normally. And I've heard things being exposed even in other chambers that the government needs to set about a threshold for the potency of even marijuana. But there's not even a potency for marijuana in the international sphere. Reality is that in order for you to get toxic levels of this drug, a person will have to probably smoke about 40 or 50 spliffs at one time. But the real concern that is now causing real issues in terms of behavior issues for us is as I said before, the polydrug use, the combinations, when you mix everything together. And this is what parents need to look out for. Because it's those combinations that cause persons to become delusional, disoriented, listless, the maladaptive patterns of behaviors that they can't control. A lot of these things that are causing children to react in a negative way and doing some abnormal things, dangerous things. And that is what parents must be able to look for. So I'm employing persons, especially young mothers and fathers, who are seeking to ensure that the proper development, psychologically and otherwise, to their child, to equally be aware of the potential risks of exposing the child to illegal substances, because this is a real conversation. And this is a conversation we all must be equal to in terms of ensuring that our children are given the opportunity to develop and to be developed, to be the global citizens that we know that there can be. The importance of this must never be underestimated. And so, this legislation, the Family Leave Bill, it has everything in it. It is right with all the things that we expect in a bill that will ensure that the parents have the time, that they have that connection, that they're able to spend those nascent moments with the child to help develop it and help provide care and love for it. But equally, I'm saying that we have to be responsible as parents to ensure in those same moments, 6 months, whatever, even beyond, that we are mindful of our actions to the extent that we do not inadvertently expose our children to illegal substances. And equally, to ensure that we provide the nutritional support that we know that these children deserve. I am happy to associate myself with this bill, and I want to say to the Member of Parliament for St. Peter, North, South, East, and West, that his flowers will be given to him today, and we won't wait till he goes to the far beyond, because he has done a wonderful job. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged. Thank you.
All right, Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to wrap up with mixed emotions. I heard a lot about flowers, but I'm, at this point, not really thinking about me. I left this honorable chamber after being subjected to something that I would prefer. The Spirit just told me not to say what I wanted to say. But I was subjected, and not just myself, but all of us in this chamber, including the public officers, were subjected to a diatribe, meandering, nonsensical, all the negatives that you could imagine. But Mr. Speaker, on my way to the dining room, I passed the wall which has a television screen. The now Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow was sharing some thoughts. A video clip was playing. And it occurred to me that the leader of the opposition, the honourable member for Christchurch South spent an hour in here this morning trying to pull down the legacy of Errol Barrow. He spent an hour attempting to destroy the legacy of Errol Walton Barrow. And that disturbs me. It disturbs me. While attempting to say that we have brought into law this matter of 12 months employment in order to be eligible for the benefit, maternity, and no maternity and paternity, he is destroying or attempting to destroy or castigate Errol Barrow, because it was Errol Walton Barrow who put that stipulation in the Employment of Women Maternity Leave Act of 1976, July. It was the leader of the party, the person who formed the party that the honourable member now leads, attempting to destroy the legacy of a great man, Errol Walton Barrow. And I have to say to you and to the chamber through you that every country with paternity leave and maternity leave have stipulations for some period of time that a person has to be employed in order to benefit from the maternity leave or the paternity leave. It is nothing new, but it is certainly nothing that we have introduced. His party, when in government in the first half of 1976, instituted this stipulation. He also continued to attempt to destroy the legacy of Errol Barrow by suggesting that we have created an offense. And he portrayed it in a very nasty is not probably parliamentary. Strange is parliamentary, but strange is not, but I don't want to say strong enough. It is not representative of what he was trying to do. I want to be fair to him. I want to be fair to him. It was repugnant to suggest that, you know, we heard things like criminalizing sex and pregnancy. We heard that the pregnant woman can go to prison. Now, the question I have for the honourable member for Christchurch South is, how many women in this country have gone to prison because of the policy of the Democratic Labour Party under Errol Walton Barrow? In that legislation, Mr. Speaker, there is the provision of a fine and 12 months imprisonment for the same offenses that we have brought over into this new bill and hopefully into the new act. Nothing new. A sinister attempt to destroy the legacy of Errol Barrow. The Employment of Women Maternity Leave Act is a Democratic Labour Party piece of legislation. And I thought that I was clear to say that. I don't like ambushing anybody. I was very clear. You know, this is not a political matter. Otherwise, I would not have given any credit to the Democratic Labour Party to say that there is the consensus that the Democratic Labour Party brought the maternity leave. We have now introduced paternity and we've extended maternity. Governance is about a continuum. But the honourable member continues his practice, as terrible as it is, in turning every debate into a purely partisan debate. The terrible thing about today is that while he turns it into such a partisan debate, he is attempting to establish himself as the preeminent leader of the Democratic Labour Party and destroying the legacy of the great gentleman who formed the party. Despicable, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Not a word about the fact that the matter, the leave, is a good thing. but just attempting to destroy the leader of the party he now claims to lead. I am thankful to my colleagues who contributed to this debate. Once we came back from lunch, the debate resumed a level of richness, which stopped after I gave my presentation, and I'm not praising myself, but the challenge that I have is that my parents have always taught me, don't compare yourself to the lowest common denominator, because however you look at yourself, if you compare yourself to the worst, you're going to come out good. But just let me say that my colleagues who contributed to the debate have shared a number of perspectives that I'm sure my officers who have stayed on, and I have to compliment them for staying on. Public officers are not political, so I'm not going to say that they endured the leader of the opposition. They stayed on because they wanted to hear the fullness of the debate. They have taken notes. This bill and this act, when we've completed the process, is not the end of the road. One of my colleagues indicated that we are not waiting for perfection. Life is a journey. Governing is a journey. This is a significant step, but this is by no means the end of the journey. We will return to this piece of legislation in the future. We will have to improve it. We will have to modernize it. And I've said in this honorable chamber on a number of occasions, this Barbados Labour Party government does not consider itself perfect. We make mistakes. Sometimes we bring pieces of legislation, well-meaning, to this honorable chamber, and we recognize that there is more that could be done, more that we have to do. But I am proud to be a member of this party, because a party that recognizes that it is not perfect, but does not allow itself to be hamstrung while waiting for perfection, is an organization that I want to be a part of, as imperfect as I am myself. My public officers don't believe that I believe that I am not perfect, but I do, and I'm saying it for the record. I say it sometimes in management meetings, but I'm saying it publicly here today. I want to just speak briefly to a couple of things. With respect to the benefits for self-employed persons, the benefits of self-employed persons will be exactly the same, maternity, paternity, child grant, exactly the same as for employed persons. In the consequential amendments, we have framed the eligibility criteria to reflect the new mode of contributions that self-employed persons are now managed by. That is to say, not by using contributions on a weekly basis, but by how much is contributed in a year. And you will see in the consequential amendments reference to the minimum contribution for the relevant period. And that refers not to weekly contributions, but the contributions based on the minimum of $1,200 in a calendar year. The honorable member for St. George North spoke to the documentation, section 5.3. I agree with her. She also pointed out that the bill makes provision for accepting documentation other than that signed document, but I agree with her that there could be some greater clarity. I will use this opportunity to say to employers who sometimes say to us, we are bringing too much legislation, we're legislating too much. I will say to employers, Mr. Speaker, through you, on the floor of this honorable chamber, I expect that your good faith practice of people management, human resource management, will show in how you treat to this clause. I am saying to employers through you, Mr. Speaker, that if we find out that people are playing the fool, people meaning employers, are playing the fool on this matter and are addressing it in so subjective a way as to disadvantage a worker who should ordinarily be entitled, then I have no compunction in going to the cabinet, getting approval to ask the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel to make whatever amendment is necessary and coming back to this place. And I will spend a day, 2 days, however long it takes, to debate it to make sure that it is tightened. I do not feel that we have to do it, but that will depend on the employers of this country. The Honourable Member for St. Michael's South spoke through you to the Chief Labour Officer, and we have a level of responsibility to make sure that there is no abuse, that there is no taking advantage of in that manner. I also want to say, speaking to the comment from the Honourable Member for St. George North, that she is correct that much, if not all, of the advancements we've had in labor legislation, the protection part of the protection and production amalgam, much of it has come, like I said, if not all, from agitation from organizations representing workers. I put it that way because initially, it may not have been trade unions. There was not a trade union involved in 1937, but there have been trade unions before that, the Working Men's Association, not registered, but I consider it to be a trade union, and then the Barbados Workers Union in 41, and well, actually, the Barbados Nurses Association in 1934 or 5 preceded the Workers' Uprising, and then trade unions officially after the act was passed in the 40s. And the Honourable Member for St. George North is here in 2025 when we are about to pass the bill that will allow for paternity leave. A predecessor of hers, who was also a predecessor of mine, because he was the Honourable Member for St. Peter, at that time the senior member for St. Peter, he was the influencer she referred to for the maternity leave. And we have to congratulate the leadership of the Barbados Workers Union for being in the forefront of agitating for many of the gains that workers have realized in this country. And again, Mr. Speaker, you know, one of the things I like about this party is that we don't need no glory to ourselves. We give the credit where the credit is due. This is not about any of us as individuals. This is about national development. There are a number of ideas. Some I touched on before, the matter of adoption. Surrogacy was also mentioned. Pregnancy, and many of these were mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central. Pregnancy, bereavement, spousal maternity benefit. The Honourable Member for St. George North spoke to benefit for fathers in situations of multiple births. These are all matters that we will continue to discuss even as we continue to refine our legislation. Before I conclude, I need to speak to the matter of breastfeeding. The Honourable Member for St. Michael's South spoke to it quite eloquently, but I join with him in recognizing the work of the Breastfeeding and Child Nutrition Foundation, and particularly the work of Dr. Bernard, who heads that organization. She and her colleagues in the organization have done sterling work in recognizing the value of parental involvement, maternal involvement. She and the organization have also been agitating for extended maternity leave as well as paternity leave. I congratulate the organization here on the floor of this House for achieving their 10th anniversary this year. In 2025, the Breastfeeding and Child Nutrition Foundation celebrates its 10th anniversary. And we have committed ourselves as a ministry to supporting their work, to doing all that we can to encourage employers, business places, to facilitate mothers in expressing milk, storing milk, wherever possible, providing the facilities that allow for the complete raising of children. It is not just time on its own. It is not money on its own with respect to payments or grants. It includes the ability to breastfeed and all the benefits we have heard when the member for St. Michael South spoke. So, Mr. Speaker, having responded and shared my thoughts from the perspective of wrapping up, I will conclude by again thanking the officers of the Ministry of Labor, Social Security, and the Third Sector. The acting permanent secretary, he is here, and his team, some of his team, the CEO of the National Insurance and Social Security Service, and some of her team. They're also still here with us in the chamber. The length of time they're here is reflective of the kind of work that they put in to keep the ministry going. And I also, again, will thank the drafters and the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel for the work that they have done for our ministry and the work that they continue to do in helping us manage and develop our country, but from our ministry in particular, helping us to serve the working people of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few comments by way of wrap-up, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Beg second.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now beg that you do leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
But all the amendments in schedule. No one schedule. So I don't know if we can call it, but I don't have parts. So I don't know what we can call it. Want to fight.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, permission to call the clauses in parts, please.
Permission so granted.
Clauses 1 through 8.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clauses 1 through 8 do stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 through 8 stand part. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 9 through 16.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 9 through 16 stand part.
The question is that clauses 9 through 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move there are 4 small amendments, but important amendments that I need to move to the schedule. At E, and this is on page, sorry, not E, 11, on page 16 of the bill. 11(1)(b), Roman 2. 11(1)(b), Roman 2. The amendment is that the words "or credited" be deleted. The words "or credited" be deleted so that that clause, 11(1)(b), Roman 2, will read, "Not less than 16 contributions has been paid in the relevant year." The next amendment is 17B(1)(a), Roman numeral 2. 17B, this is on page 20, 17B(1)(a), Roman numeral 2. Again, the deletion of the words "or credited." Deletion of the words "or credited," so that the clause reads, "Not less than 16 contributions had been paid in the relevant quarters." Also on that page, at 17B(1)(b), Roman numeral 1, there's the word PAIN. That should be deleted and replaced with PAID, paid. This is at 17B(1)(b), small b, Roman numeral 1. Replace PAIN with PAID. And the final amendment will be on page 23. This is 17D, 17D 2A, Roman numeral 2. 17D 2A, Roman numeral 2. And at the end of that clause, where there is currently the word "and," that is to be replaced by "or," O-R. Delete "and," A-N-D, and replace with "or." And with those amendments, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule, as amended, be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule as amended be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you now report to His Honor, the Speaker, the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor, the Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill with amendments in committee. Honourable Member St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Family Leave Act 2025.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 10 minutes past 6.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 10 after 6. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 10 minutes after 6. This sitting is resumed.
Order number 10, sir. Order number 10, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs and Information, to move the second reading of the Immigration Bill 2025.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are actually two orders, sir. One is in relation to the Immigration Bill 2025, and the other one is in relation to the Citizenship Bill 2025. Sir, these two matters are inextricably linked, and actually one of them informs the other one in terms of certain criteria to be met for the granting, in this case, of citizenship. So it's convenient, sir, and I ask that I be allowed to take them as a cognate debate because it makes sense, sir.
The question is that the two bills be debated as a cognate debate in that they are inextricably linked. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, it is late in the day. I am aware. I look across, I look around, and I see the lean, hungry look of some of my colleagues, sir, who will weather the storm. I also am painfully aware, sir, that my PS, the Chief Immigration Officer and Immigration Consultant have actually been here since this morning to lend support. So I will try to be as brief as I can while doing justice to these two signal pieces of legislation. So let me start by saying what we have here is a game changer. It is a game changer for Barbados locally. It's a game changer for Barbados as part of a regional unit. It is a game changer for Barbados on the international stage. By way of introduction, sir, Barbados is at a critical demographic crossroads with an aging population, declining birth rates, and a steady loss of young, skilled citizens, creating a shrinking workforce that cannot sustain long-term GDP growth or support the rising costs of pensions, healthcare, or other social services. The erosion of our productive population, and by productive population I mean those who are still of working age, it threatens our nation's competitiveness, limits its ability to attract investment and fill skill gaps, and risks locking the country into a cycle of population decline, economic stagnation, and social constraints. Without urgent action, sir, these trends will undermine both the country's current prosperity and its future stability. To counterbalance these trends, sir, and safeguard national development, modern, effective immigration policies are required. Both these bills, sir, the Immigration Bill 2025 and the Citizenship Bill, will attract valuable human capital and investment, promote innovation, and facilitate economic diversification, strengthening our nation's competitive edge in the global marketplace. These are legislative reforms to modernize Barbados's migration laws to reflect evolving regional commitments and international trade obligations. This alignment, sir, underscores Barbados's commitment to regional integration and global engagement, reinforcing our status as a responsible, forward-looking member of the international community. Sir, we've heard it in here over and over. We know it. The governor of the central bank has alluded to it. The prime minister has spoken about it. We feel it. The minister who's responsible for social care knows it. All who are connected to the NISS are aware of it. Barbados is experiencing a sustained and well-documented population decline. This was confirmed by the 2021 population and housing census and subsequent demographic data. The median age rose from 37.3 years in 2010 to 42.5 in 2021. I repeat that, sir. The median age in Barbados rose from 37.3 years in 2010 to 42.5 years in 2021, while the population in that same period fell by 8,731 persons, reflecting both rapid aging and overall contraction. To put it in context, one would expect over time that as people die, they're replaced by people being born, and at a faster rate. So populations tend to increase. We are in a sustained and significant population decline. This shift is intensifying demands on pensions, healthcare, and social services, and placing great pressure on public finances and infrastructure. I'm about to give some startling statistics, sir, that I was aware generally of it, but in the preparation for this debate and having to pull the figures together with the raw numbers in front of me, it gave me significant pause. Since 2016, births have steadily declined while deaths have consistently outnumbered them. In 2022, Barbados recorded 2,156 births against 3,338 deaths. By 2024, births fell to 1,995 compared to 3,088 deaths. Between 2021 and 2024, the total population decreased from 269,090 to an estimated 263,476, underscoring an accelerating natural decline. This has implications, sir, for all of us. As persons get older and they're not being replaced at the same rate, you're going to have a smaller workforce supporting an older aging population. So the draw on the social services, the draw on the pensions are going to be more significant than the contributions to the same pool of funds. The existing Immigration Act, Cap 190, and the Barbados Citizenship Act, Cap 186, remain the core legislative frameworks for regulating entry, residence, variation of stay, and citizenship. While both of these acts have had minor amendments over the years, significant legislative gaps remain, limiting Barbados' ability to respond competitively in a global environment where countries worldwide are leveraging modern immigration frameworks to balance population decline, stimulate economic activity, and attract skilled human capital. As I said, sir, the shrinking and aging population threatens workforce stability, economic growth, and fiscal stability, while increasing the burden on health and social services. The net outward migration as well continues to drain the country of its young and skilled workforce. So a lot of youngsters are now awaiting the results of their CXC exams and their CAPE exams. And I spoke to 3 persons who, based on their first year CAPE exams, are expecting to get scholarships. Not one of those 3 persons has a long-term plan which involves Barbados. Not one. Our best and our brightest are looking outward for their development, not inward. Many Barbadians leave to pursue education and employment opportunities abroad, further diminishing our working age population. This migration trend compounds the effects of low fertility and natural decrease, exacerbating labor shortages and weakening the economic base. So when we think of labor shortages, we only have to think of the construction boom going on right now. There's more construction going on in Barbados than ever before, and we cannot find the labor force to sustain the construction. I know because in immigration, we've been processing plenty of work permits for construction because the firms just can't find persons to turn cement. They can't find persons to lay blocks. They can't find persons to dig wells. They can't find carpenters. So our national natural development is far outstripping the available labor force in Barbados. So this leaves fewer resources to fund pensions, healthcare, and social programs, even as the demand for these services rises. Labor shortages stifle business, they stifle expansion, slow innovation, and reduce our country's attractiveness to investors. If left unchecked, Barbados faces a future of declining competitiveness, rising fiscal strain, and reduced resilience in the face of emerging global economic challenges. But all is not lost. We have to look, sir, when nature does not provide the solution, to think outside the box. And our outside the box thinking has led us to the obvious effective immigration legislation and new immigration strategies. So, with the population shortfalls, aging demographics, threatening socioeconomic resilience, this legislation that we're debating today, that I'm reading on, empowers the Immigration Department to manage migration effectively, support investment, enhance business competitiveness, and uphold the integrity of citizenship while fostering diversity and sustainable growth. Without this legislative intervention, Barbados cannot generate the productivity needed to sustain GDP growth or drive innovation. This demographic imbalance will place mounting fiscal pressure on our pensions, healthcare, and other essential social services, as fewer working-age taxpayers are left to support an ever-growing retiree population. If these trends continue, sir, Barbados is on a trajectory of natural population decline, with reduced economic development to combat global issues and undermining prosperity and meeting our sustainable goals. So when we look at the justification for the legislative reform, the two bills together modernize the archaic laws and provide a forward-thinking, innovative, and comprehensive legislative framework which targets population decline while securing sustainable growth. By expanding the pathways to citizenship and permanent residence for specific target groups, including skilled workers, Barbadian descendants, and resourceful retirees, this bill ensures that the nation attracts individuals who will contribute meaningfully to our economy and our community. It removes outdated and restrictive provisions such as abolishing the antiquated immigrant status. I think Barbados, sir, is probably the only country that I'm aware of that has such a status now. Most countries, the two immigration statuses are resident, permanent resident, and citizenship. We had the bridge of the immigrant status, and we are removing that, sir, in favor of a streamlined permanent residency system. So eliminating the barriers that have hindered long-term growth. Additionally, sir, both pieces of legislation align Barbados with the CARICOM, the move towards CARICOM free movement, and the World Trade Organization obligations, enhancing labor mobility and supporting trade and services critical to a modern, developing, and innovative economy. Finally, sir, by introducing flexible permit categories such as reside and reside and work, we address workforce gaps with efficiency and responsiveness, fostering an environment that attracts and retains talent without unnecessary red tape delay. Sir, we are sending a signal to the world that we are on a pivot. We are sending a signal to the world that we are turning towards serious development and growth for our country. We are sending a signal to the world that Barbados is open for business and is creating the environment for other persons who are serious about business to come and invest in Barbados and be a part of the Barbadian experience. This proactive approach positions immigration as a driver of national development, ensuring Barbados can meet its demographic challenges head-on, while protecting the rights of citizens and maintaining border security. So, one of the things that we had to factor significantly, we have just come off of all the grey lists and the blacklists and everything, and we are, as far as the economic world is concerned, we are right. We're in the right position, doing the right things. A number of our Caribbean neighbors have turned to taking the easy route of going citizenship by investment, but citizenship by investment poses its own issues. Persons can acquire citizenship simply by investment, by spending a certain amount of money in approved government programs, or by buying property in a country with no requirement to reside there. While that may satisfy the short-term goals of a country in getting money into its coffers, it creates other issues. Barbados has the strongest passport in the Caribbean. We are proud of it. Barbadians enjoy visa-free travel to most countries in the world, more than any other country in the Caribbean. We pride ourselves on the strength of our passport. Our passport is valuable. If we went the route of citizenship by investment, that threatens the integrity of our passport. We be granting citizenship to people that we don't know, that we have no way of knowing. Persons who may have a past, a shady past, and in particular, citizenship by investment is often linked to money laundering and criminal activity. In all of our drafting, the one thing we were certain was we were not going the route of citizenship by investment. Anybody who ends up with citizenship in Barbados must have some genuine connection to our country and must be somebody that we have vetted, we are comfortable with, and we are pleased to say, welcome to Barbados, you are now one of us. Sir, some key provisions under the immigration bill. There's a ministerial discretion to grant reside or reside and work status. So the bill now empowers the minister to give permission to reside or work and work for flexible periods under tailored conditions. This formalizes and streamlines previous customary practices that were generally employed where persons married, citizens of Barbados married somebody and they came here with their spouse, with their partner, and the person applied for citizenship. The person had no status in Barbados, they had no work permit, they were in limbo. So the reside and work has been granted for years, but it has no legislative basis. It was a ministerial discretion with no legislative basis, intended to plug a gap until the person can actually qualify for some other status to allow them to reside permanently in Barbados. We have now, it has worked, but it needed some legislative footing. It didn't make sense for us to draft new legislation and not recognize the reality of something that served a purpose and has a potential benefit and not embody any legislation. So we have codified the reside and work regime, sir. Qualifications for permanent residents. One of the cutting-edge, transformative things that we've done in Barbados is our approach to permanent residents as a unit, as a block. So the bill expands the eligibility for permanent residency to include spouses of Barbadian citizens, retirees with adequate financial means and their dependents, and this encourages long-term residence among economically self-sufficient individuals who contribute to the social fabric and economic stability of Barbados. As I said before, sir, when somebody came with their spouse, the spouse could not work and was in limbo, and we plugged that gap by doing the reside and work. Under the new provisions, sir, of the immigration legislation, once you are a spouse of a Barbadian, you are automatically entitled to residency. So once your spouse is no limbo, you are now a permanent resident. You have to wait a period before qualifying for citizenship, right? But you at least can come, live, work, and carry on your life with no hassle. So the other thing that has been embodied is the provisions now allow permanent residents to apply on behalf of minor children or dependents with disabilities to obtain permanent resident status as well, ensuring protection of the most vulnerable. So if I am a permanent resident and I have a child or I have a family member with a disability, that person can come to Barbados under my umbrella and they can apply straight away for permanent residence. As I said before, sir, we've abolished the status of immigrant status, and anyone who, at the time this bill is passed and becomes law, who currently holds the position of immigrant will automatically be grandfathered into residency. So, cutting edge, sir, cutting edge is the point system as well for permanent residency. So the bill introduces a merit-based system allowing individuals who meet specific criteria, including age, Barbadian lineage, education, skills, professional experience, financial resources, and also senior diplomatic or international service to apply for permanent residency in Barbados. Applicants who achieve the maximum of 10 points as categorized can apply in the prescribed form, paying the requisite fees for residency. So one of the other things that we got, sir, a number of persons living abroad want to represent Barbados. They may have a vague connection to Barbados. They may have come to Barbados a number of times and they want to represent Barbados, for example, in sports. So by having the points-based system, before residency was determined strictly on length of time spent in Barbados. You had to be in Barbados for a certain amount of time, and then at the expiration of that time, you could apply for residency with no other criteria. There's no way to fast track it. There's no way to say we require specialized skills and grant somebody the residency. It was simply on the mundane and archaic principle of time spent. Now, sir, with points, just to give an example, I'll get the points when I go through the provisions of the bill. But based on your age, you can get up to 5 points straight away. On your skill set, you can get up to 5 points as well. So if you are, let's say, between 18 and 30 and are a great footballer with proven skills, then straight away on that you qualify for residency. It is not, understand, sir, there are 2 layers. Residency is the first layer, which we have made accessible. We want people in Barbados benefiting Barbados as quickly as possible. So we've made residency accessible. Citizenship now, because of the implications of citizenship, because of what is associated with the passport, because of what is associated internationally with being a citizen, citizenship necessarily has a more rigid framework, which involves specifically time in Barbados. So the Citizenship Bill introduces significant reforms aimed at modernizing and expanding the legal framework governing citizenship, supporting national development priorities in a changing global environment. It creates new ways for acquisition, deprivation, and renunciation of citizenship, providing greater clarity and flexibility as opposed to the current law, where citizenship may be acquired by descent, marriage, registration, and naturalization after continuous residence with similar treatment for nationals by birth. Now, sir, under our citizenship, our existing citizenship legislation, there were some disparities as well. So if you were a citizen by birth, that was the most powerful form of citizenship. You were effectively a first-class citizen. If you became, and you can pass your citizenship on to your child. If you were a citizenship by naturalization, that you were not born here and you had a child overseas, that child did not necessarily become a citizen of Barbados because that was passed on through a parent who had birthright citizenship. We're removing the classes of citizen. There's no first-class citizen, there's no second-class citizen, there's no nothing. Once you are a citizen of Barbados going forward, however that citizenship is acquired, all of the rights, obligations, responsibilities, everything that attaches to citizenship attaches to you, regardless of the avenue you took to acquire your citizenship. Sir, expanded permanent residency eligibility. So the bill also formalizes permanent residents if they meet the following residency criteria. So we have most favored nation status. So a national of a CARICOM member state must have resided in Barbados for at least 180 days within the past 730 days. So that is I do my division. 3 months per year for 2 years. So if you are from a CARICOM country, we make it easy for you. If you resided in Barbados for 3 months a year for a period of 2 years, at the end of 2 years, you can apply. So if you pick up the entire time in 1 year, it doesn't matter. You still have to go 2 years before you apply. But you can apply after 2 years, having spent 180 days, that's 6 months. For a non-CARICOM national, they must have resided in Barbados for at least 270 days within the past 1,095 days immediately preceding the date of the application. So once again, you have to do the 90 days a year, but you do it for 3 years, right? Because quite frankly, our CARICOM brothers and sisters must enjoy some competitive advantage in getting status in Barbados, especially if you're going to free movement, than somebody who is not a CARICOM nationals. So Barbados, more than anybody else, is towing the line for CARICOM integration and Caribbean unity. Yeah, that's worthy of a clap. Sir, the other thing we've done is the recognition of spousal independence of CARICOM skilled nationals. So the legislation explicitly addresses the difficulties spouses and dependents who accompany a CARICOM skilled national living in Barbados face in attaining citizenship and creates pathways for spousal independence, easing their ability to acquire citizenship while promoting family unity within the regional labor movement. Under the last administration, despite all of the things, ideas, and policies and philosophies that informed CARICOM skilled national status, the last government interpreted the legislation to mean that if you came in on a CARICOM skilled national certification, any time spent in Barbados did not go towards the acquisition of any permanent status, which, quite frankly, was a nonsense, because somebody who does not look like us, coming from a country that is not our neighbor, here on a work permit, could have that same time credited towards the acquisition of a permanent immigration status. So we're making it easy. For CARICOM, skilled nationals, persons born in CARICOM, the path to getting residency for you, for your spouse, for your dependents, has been simplified entirely. We recognize the legitimacy of your CARICOM nationality, and we factored that into making it easier for you than we make it for anybody else. Sir, one of the most significant changes that is being made is with respect to citizenship by descent. Currently, you can only get citizenship by descent if one of your parents is a Barbadian who was born in Barbados. First generation citizenship by descent. That has caused us a number of problems. This is perhaps the single most anticipated part of these two pieces of legislation. To acquire citizenship by descent, sir, it trickles down as far as great-grandchild. So not just your child, not just your child's child, but your child's child's child. There are many persons with Barbadian heritage living abroad in the diaspora who are in love with the idea of Barbados. They want to be recognized as a Barbadian. They've been trying to explore getting Barbadian citizenship. Some of these are promising professionals. Some of these are entrepreneurs. Some of these are athletes who want to represent Barbados. Right now, sir, I'm under pressure from someone living abroad who is the grandchild of a Barbadian who is an exceedingly talented athlete who just missed qualifying for the UK Olympic team, athletics, but they want to represent Barbados. They would easily qualify to represent Barbados, but they can't do it because with our narrow legislative framework right now, they are not the child of a Barbadian born in Barbados. And please note the difference as well. Your citizenship by descent, sir, we erase the initial qualifying criteria of the root person having to be born in Barbados. Once that person is a citizen of Barbados, however that citizenship was acquired, they can pass that citizenship down 3 generations. So this is perhaps the single most anticipated provision in the 2 pieces of legislation. Sir, additional grounds for citizenship, the revised legislation makes provisions for persons who are born outside of Barbados and who have the ability to become economically established in Barbados and have been resident in Barbados are meeting set criteria to be registered as citizens of Barbados. And also, sir, with respect to minors, there was a bit of a gender imbalance. I am real hesitant. The last time I mentioned anything called gender neutral, sir, I was castigated for it years ago and told never ever mention that again as informing any piece of legislation. So I will not say gender neutral. I will say non-gender specific for this one. If you were a minor who was adopted by a Barbadian male, your father had the right to apply for your citizenship. if you were a minor adopted by a Barbadian female, you did not qualify to get citizenship. So there was a serious, obvious imbalance right there. Why should the man be able to adopt a child out of love and care for that child, and the child be conferred with Barbadian citizenship, but the mother, the woman who equally loves, nurtures, and looks out for the child, cannot do it? It created an imbalance, sir, that I cannot believe lasted this long without a great uprising. But we have corrected that, sir. So either adopter, regardless of gender, once you're a citizen of Barbados, can pass your citizenship on to an adopted minor. Sir, all of these here are meant to help promote our population growth, strengthen our global competitiveness, and ensure citizenship remains a value status and supporting inclusive social and economic development. Legislative intervention, sir. Without the intervention, we could not correct this naturally. A former Minister of Education from the other side has said Barbadians need to have more children, and he was lambasted and laughed at for that. But I think we have come to realize, sir, that it is not happening naturally. And the only way for it to happen and for us to actually get the population necessary to sustain our way of life, sustain our social programs, sustain our tax base, broaden our tax base, is for us to import persons into Barbados. We're not importing anybody. We want people to come here who have Barbados at heart, who are Barbadians in their way of thinking, who identify with us as a people and who want to be a part of our Barbadian family. And when they come and they bring their children, and we expand the base to include up to great-grandchildren, straight away you can see that the pool that we're pulling from, we want to kick-start the population to try to get it back to where it's supposed to be, sir. So, I will go straight to the legislation because I'm feeling sorry for my colleagues who have been here the whole morning. So it is not often that you get to actually correct something that is offensive to you. I'm in the enviable position, sir, to be able to correct something that offended me for years. And it shows exactly how far behind the 8 ball we were and how much in need of addressing this legislation was. One of the things that occupied cabinet over and over, so both these pieces of legislation, sir, normally when we go to cabinet, somebody comes and says we want to have legislation governing, I don't know, I almost said tint. Somebody comes and says we want to have legislation governing family benefits. And the instructions are given to the CPC to draft the legislation based on this policy that's in cabinet paper. And it comes back as a drafted piece of legislation, people read through it, and we approve it, and it gets laid in cabinet, in Parliament. Sir, these two pieces of legislation came back to cabinet over and over and over again, down to when we had nailed it down and it came back, it was sent back for something, because we tried to, you measure twice and cut once, we measure this 100 times, sir. Everything, this had to be as cutting edge as possible. Everything we could think of that should inform our immigration policy was in here. Everything that was offensive, that people found offensive, we tried to take it out. So there was full participation from the entire cabinet, from other stakeholders. We consulted with persons who do immigration matters in Barbados, prominent immigration attorneys in Barbados. And we ended up with, sir, what we believe to encompass most of what a modern piece of legislation should be. The other thing we did, sir, is we put the old legislation to one side. The temptation is always there to try to patch holes in what already exists, but then you limit yourself to that creative framework. So we pretty much put the legislation to one side and said, okay, what do we want in our new Immigration Act? Let's not refer to the old one. What do we want in the new immigration legislation? What do we want in the citizenship legislation? And then we drafted it accordingly. So, by way of comparison, sir, under the old immigration legislation, we have prohibited persons. Every immigration legislation has a list of prohibited persons. Under the old legislation, prohibited persons, number one, category number one, idiots, imbeciles, feeble-minded persons, epileptics, persons of unsound mind or mentally deficient, dumb, blind, or physically handicapped to the extent of being unable to earn a living, or persons likely to become charges on public funds. That, sir, was the first category of persons. That, sir, was on every immigration form. Please refer to the back page. If you are one of the persons in that schedule, so every person applying for immigration status in Barbados up to now had to read through a form that says, if you're an idiot, imbecile, feeble-minded person, I don't even have to look at it. I know it that well. Epileptic persons, unsound mind, dumb, blind, physically handicapped, whatnot. You can't come to Barbados. Not that you can't acquire status. This says you are prohibited. You should not even set foot in the country. Imagine in this day and age. In this day and age, our legislation says if you are mentally deficient, dumb, blind, or physically handicapped, you shouldn't be here. It had to go. This offended me from the time I first saw it as a lawyer. I have spoken about this so many times. As I said, I know it by heart. It was the greatest pleasure in my life to be able to draft that schedule and remove that. Sir, another one that came up recently, there was a person who comes to Barbados quite often who is a gypsy. The Honourable Leader of Government Business knows the person well. And he is a very wealthy gypsy, but he's a gypsy, a Romanian gypsy. And gypsies are, by description, professional beggars. So he actually made the joke that he would like to come and live in Barbados, he would like to invest in Barbados, but by virtue of being a professional beggar and a gypsy, he didn't think he'd be welcome. I had to assure him, sir, that we don't really hold to that anymore. It is there because it hasn't been moved, but please feel free to come and bring your money and invest in our country. Other persons, sir, who would have been excluded from Barbados, if you were living in Barbados and had not been living here for 5 years, if you were convicted of one offense for the possession of cannabis, one offense for simple possession, which of less than a trafficable quantity, sir, even where the sentence was non-custodial, you know and I know that person will be deported. The only way you escape deportation was had you been living here for 5 years. So, all in the United States where weed is legal, marijuana consumption is legal most places. It's decriminalized, simple possession is decriminalized here in Barbados. But if the police held you with a spliff, one spliff, out you go. You know we've begged for people over and over. They did nothing wrong. They might have been at a reggae show, at a something. You here in Barbados for 4 years, you got a job, you got a girlfriend, you got a child, and they hold you with a spliff and you have been deported. That had to go. Sir, another provision in there was persons seeking to enter Barbados who are not in possession of a passport. So we changed that because even with the free movement, we're looking to recognize national IDs once they have sufficient biodata on them to verify. We know that some people, Americans, used to come in with driver's licenses, and persons in the OECS can travel in between OECS countries with driver's licenses and IDs. So while a passport is desirable, if you can explain why you're not traveling on a passport and your ID is sufficient to properly identify you and for us to do our background checks on you, then that is no longer a prohibition to come into Barbados. So what are we going to know, sir? What are some of the exciting new features of the new legislation? I will go for citizens first. We've expanded, sir, persons who can automatically become citizens in Barbados. And this one was one of the latest additions to it. We recognize that we're trying to get the best and brightest and most talented to Barbados. We recognize we're trying to get persons into Barbados with skill sets that will grow our economy and inure to the benefit of Barbados and Barbadians generally. And some other countries have offered citizenship to members of the, I think, the first West Indies World Cup winning team. In the current climate, sir, I don't think the appetite was towards awarding citizenship based on any contributions to cricket. But we recognize, sir, that persons such as former Secretaries General of CARICOM should be automatically entitled to citizenship of Barbados. Holders of the Order of the Caribbean Community should be automatically entitled to citizenship in Barbados. Former chancellors and former vice-chancellors of the University of West Indies. Former heads of state of member states of CARICOM. Former heads of government of member states of CARICOM. And the spouses and dependents of the persons listed above. So effectively, sir, all who have made a contribution to the Caribbean, to our Caribbean way of life, to the development of CARICOM, automatically qualify upon application as of right to be registered as citizens of Barbados. Sir, with respect to the immigration legislation, sir, some key features. In following the philosophy that outlined the approach to former Secretaries General and former heads of state and whatnot, sir, persons who would qualify to be permanent residents of Barbados, persons who, by reason of age, Barbadian descent, education, skill, or experience, or have financial resources, or who have served in Barbados as a member staff of a diplomatic mission. So anybody, for example, from the Canadian High Commission, the British High Commission, the US Embassy, if you have served in Barbados as a member staff of a diplomatic mission, after you've finished your term, you can apply for and you will be granted residency in Barbados. Because, sir, we actually have a number of persons. There's one person, I'm going to call his name, sir, with your permission, if you trust me to do so. Flores is a very difficult last name. Flores, sir, we all know Flores. Flores came to Barbados with an international mission. Flores was the happiest person in the world to get Barbadian citizenship. When I advised him that we have relaxed the provisions in relation to persons with diplomatic missions and whatnot, Flores was excited. Flores wanted Barbadian citizenship. He came here as an expat. He integrated himself into the life of Barbados. By the time he left, sir, he was more Bajan than a lot of Bajans. But it meant so much to him. And he's not the only one. A number of persons who come here with their skill sets and bring their skill sets to diplomatic missions want the option to continue to live in Barbados afterwards. And we think, sir, if we are looking to get, as I said, to get the best, brightest, most talented and persons who can help to develop Barbados, then that is a perfect sector to pull from. So if you're a member staff of the diplomatic mission, right, you can qualify for permanent residence. If you serve in any country as a member staff of an international organization, so for example, if you are a member staff of the IMF, if you're a member staff of the World Bank, if you're a member staff of, for example, the World Food Program, if you're a member of staff of any of those critical international organizations, you qualify for residency. The other one we put in there, sir, there are a number of persons who have served in our missions abroad. So persons, if I take Cuba, we were recently in Cuba, my PS, sir, and there was a lady who was working with the Barbadian mission in Cuba. And she wanted to be a Bajan. She so enjoyed working there. She so enjoyed the people she met, the friendships she had, the visiting people who came in. She's so bonded with them, she actually worked as our translator, right? A lovely lady. All she wanted was to be a Bajan. And when I actually told her, I said, any new changes to our legislation, we are looking at giving residency to persons who work in our missions abroad. So that woman was overjoyed. Once we passed this, eventually, sir, the first phone call I am going to make is to the lady. I'm going to try to tell her in Spanish, which may not go down well, but she will get the message, sir. That will be my first phone call to that woman. I'm picturing her in my mind when I think about persons who so want to be a part of the Barbadian experience and to live here. Sir, as I said, it's on a points basis. The other thing as well, sir, is we made a provision for excess points. So if you're an exceptionally skilled person and you can easily get the 10 points, but you have qualifications that will give you points past the 10, then you can actually allocate those points to a dependent who can benefit from those points in order to qualify for residency. So the more skilled you are, the more you bring into Barbados, the more we are welcoming you and everybody who's coming with you. Sir, the one concern that was raised was, what about persons who, for example, have gotten citizenship by investment in another country, in another Caribbean country, and are coming here trying to leverage that citizenship by investment as a CARICOM national to get citizenship in Barbados. So because of those and the other, and how easy it is for the residency, because of those factors, we ensured, sir, that notwithstanding anything in that section, the minister may, in the interest of national security, refuse to grant the status of permanent resident to an applicant. So, although you may qualify, your qualification does not, as of right, entitle you to the residency. The minister, whoever that person is, can still look, do background checks and say, well, actually you qualify, but we don't want you. And can refuse that status. So in the interest of national security, sir, we have reserved unto ourselves in the legislation the ability to refuse residency to somebody who would otherwise qualify. I explained the no absolute prohibition on entering without a passport. I'm just trying, so I have so many notes on this. I'm just trying to get to the key ones, just because in my bosom resides some mercy, sir. The other thing that we've put in here is the fee for the application to revoke a deportation order. We have in our provisions the ability, when somebody is deported from Barbados, that person after a certain amount of time can apply to Barbados, can apply to come back to Barbados, they can apply to have their deportation order lifted, rescinded, revoked, whatever you want to call it, they can apply for it. And we have had a number of persons who have made the application to have the deportation orders revoked. I think perhaps, sir, that may count, I'm looking at the Chief Immigration Officer, that may count as perhaps the biggest application that we have in persons trying to come back to Barbados and trying to have their deportations orders rescinded or revoked. It is done at no cost. You write to the Chief Immigration Officer or you write to the Minister. It is considered, a report is done. If, sir, you have a clean record and you've been out for a significant amount of time, then we normally let you back in. We normally lift the deportation order. But, sir, some people have been taking it to the extreme because earlier this year, somebody was deported from Barbados, and the following month, not 28 days after the person was deported, they wrote asking for the deportation order to be lifted. Some people do it within a year, and it is making a bit of a nonsense of it. The thing is, we accept, for you to be deported, it means you did something to offend the laws of Barbados that required you to have to leave. So we are prepared to consider your application, but for that consideration, there's a fee of $3,000, which is non-refundable. So that fee was put in there, sir, to dissuade the persons who are really abusing the system. I don't see how anybody could have been deported 1 month and think, in the preponderance of common sense, that it makes sense to apply to come back in the following month. Sir, we also tightened our legislation with respect to smuggling of persons. So we have clause 33 of the bill deals with smuggling, sir. I don't want to go through all of it, but it covers false declarations, smuggling, endangering the lives of persons concerned, engaging in human or degrading treatment, and the penalties for smuggling. So the penalties for smuggling a person on conviction or indictment is a fine up to a fine of $1.5 million or imprisonment for 15 years or both. A person who is convicted of smuggling with aggravation is liable on conviction to indictment to a fine of $2 million or imprisonment for 25 years or both. So there was no recognition of smuggling of persons in the previous legislation, and because of all the conventions we're in, sir, because of all we've had to do to get off of those gray lists and blacklists, we're upping the penalties across the board, and we're instituting penalties where no penalties were there initially. Sir, also there is still the provision as well, if somebody is convicted of smuggling and the court is satisfied that any property of the person convicted was used or was intended to be used in the commission of the crime, or there was any benefits gained from the proceeds of the crime, the courts can order that the property or the benefits be forfeited and accrued to the Criminal Assets Recovery Fund. We know the Criminal Assets Recovery Fund from the other legislation, sir, dealing with corruption. And this property includes money, valuables, or other movable or immovable property. Sir, the prohibited persons I went through before, we have shortened the list of prohibited persons. So as opposed to being real detailed and real specific down to the possession of this amount of grams of marijuana or whatnot, we've swung it a bit more broad, sir. So persons who are now prohibited, as I said, we've discarded the idiots, imbeciles, and feeble-minded persons. The first person is a person who's likely to become a charge on public funds. That is standard across most immigration legislation. You don't want to allow anybody into your country who is immediately going to become a burden on the taxpayers by us having to support them. Persons whose conduct offends public morality or who groom or sexually assault minors. Persons who are, so we remove the use of a drug or suspected of using a drug, and we've gone to serve persons who have been engaged or reasonably suspected of being likely to engage in unlawful offering or exposing for sale of any dangerous or narcotic drug, or trading or trafficking in any dangerous or narcotic drug, or has been convicted of the intent to supply the same. Now, once again, that is keeping in line, sir, with the FATF things with respect to money laundering. So anybody, as I said, the position in relation to casual use of marijuana has changed, and it makes no sense to penalize somebody who may have a conviction for a simple possession or may have been caught with a spliff or a less than trafficable amount. So we instead targeting persons who are involved in trafficking. So that's where the prohibition comes, sir. Persons who have been convicted of or admit to having committed a criminal offense, which if committed in Barbados is punishable by imprisonment for a term of 5 years or longer, or who knowingly or for profit or aid encourage persons to procure other persons who are not citizens of Barbados to enter Barbados illegally. This goes back to the smuggling of persons. Persons entering Barbados at a place other than a port of entry for the purpose of avoiding detection. I'm not going to go into all of these, sir, because of what I'm going to say next. What I will say is, in total, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied that this legislation has made a difference. I'm satisfied this legislation is pointing us in a different direction. Somebody who had the benefit of reading legislation over the last 2 days said to me, and I quote, "This is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful." Sir, I don't know, sir, I am trying to work with my colleagues and wrap up quickly. I'm trying to work with my colleagues and wrap up quickly, sir, and if they insist on provoking me, there is a lot more I have not touched on. But the point is, this benefited from wide consultation. We had gone to the Bar Association quite some time ago. We'd gone to lawyers individual lawyers, I don't want to call the name, but there's certain well-known lawyers who deal in immigration some time ago. The bill then went on the back burner for a while. It resurfaced. We went out to a subcommittee of cabinet. We met a number of times on it. As I said, we drafted. Everybody in cabinet had a say. Every single person weighed in. And I will tell you, sir, that I was glad. I was glad for the interest showed. I was glad for the collective input because it allowed us to get what I consider to be the most comprehensive possible bill before the House. But sir, we are not satisfied with that as it stands. So I think this is something that the public of Barbados has the right to weigh in on. I think this should benefit from the widest possible circulation so the people of Barbados can see what we're doing in their name, so we can now benefit from the input of other interest groups and the average Barbadian if they choose to weigh in on it. So as happy as we are, this affects all of us. And because it is such a game changer, and I'm not just talking about the negative, persons may actually have positive contributions that we have not thought of. Persons may have other suggestions as to how we can improve, who we can include, or how we can do something differently in a way that we have not thought. It benefited from wide consultation in cabinet, so I think it can benefit from even wider consultation with the public and people of Barbados. For that reason, sir, I am going to move that I'm going to ask that this bill be referred to the Subcommittee of Parliament for Governance, and that further debate be suspended until that committee has given a report. And I'm also going to seek leave to speak on this again. I don't want to exhaust my ability now, so that when it comes back with input from Barbados at large, I am hamstrung in not being able to represent it again there. Sir, having said all of that, it is my great pleasure to put the Immigration Bill 2025 and the Citizenship 2025 before the people of Barbados for their consideration. I thank you, sir.
Honourable member, you therefore want to move that this bill be sent to Select Committee?
Yes, sir.
The question that the aforementioned bills be sent to the Select Committee and further consideration of this bill be postponed until it comes back from the Select Committee. All those members in favor?
I may leave to speak again, sir.
Yeah, and the move of the bill has also reserved leave to speak again. All of the motions, sir. That the first motion is that the bill be sent to Select Committee. All those in favor of the bill being sent to the Select Committee, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think yes have it. Those who also vote for it to be reserved until it's sent back from the Select Committee. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think yes have it.
Reports from select committees. You got it.
Yes.
Yeah, I got another copy.
I'm in receipt of a report of the Standing Orders Committee of the Honourable House of Assembly. The committee comprising His Honour N.G.H. Roa, Deputy Speaker, Honourable K. McConney, MP, Honourable Dwight Sutherland, MP, Honourable D.H. Mill, MP, Honourable S. George Bradshaw, MP, Honourable Wilfred Evans, MP, Honourable M.K. Cal, MP. Met on Tuesday, 29th July 2025 to consider and to agree to the proposed amendment to the composition of the Joint Select Committees by increasing it by one member from the Honorable House of Assembly pursuant to Standing Order 58A3, which reads as follows. Each committee should consist of 7 members from both Houses of Parliament, of whom 4 shall be from the House of Assembly, and of whom 4 shall be a quorum. Each committee shall elect a government member as chairman. The committee discussed the amendment on the motion of the Honorable Ms. S.J.O. Bradshaw, seconded by Ms. K.S. McConney, MP. The amendment was adopted and is now incorporated into the standing orders of the Honorable House of Assembly of Barbados, made under the Constitution of Barbados, Section 50, subsection 1, Standing Order 58A3, now reads as follows. Each committee should consist of 9 members from both Houses of Parliament, of whom 5 shall be from the House of Assembly, and of whom 4 shall be a quorum. Each committee shall elect a government member as chairman. The committee is therefore pleased to present the amendment as that of verbal recommendation and supports the adoption by the Honorable the House of Assembly. Signed, Chairman, Acting, dated this 12th day of August, 2025. The question is that this amendment be adopted. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking on the report, I therefore beg to move the motion that the following members be appointed to the respective committees. Firstly, the Honourable Member for, I beg to move the motion that the Honourable Member for St. James North be appointed to the Committee on Governance and Policy Matters. Also that the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central be appointed to the Committee on Economic and Productive Sectors, and also that the Honourable Member for St. Michael North be appointed to the Committee on Social Sector and the Environment.
Question that the aforementioned members be appointed to the respective committees. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of a very long day, and one which I believe has been quite transformational in nature. While I speak on the adjournment of the House, Mr. Speaker, for the next few weeks until the 16th of September, I do so from a place of, I think, reflection more so of today's sitting, because in just one sitting alone, we have been able to hear from the Honourable Member for St. James North, a vision for education transformation. We have had the Honourable Member for St. Peter speak to another piece of transformational legislation in the form of the Family Leave Bill, giving rights to several men across the country and to bring them in equal rights with women for leave after the mothers have given birth. And also from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East in relation to reform of our immigration laws. This, Mr. Speaker, is the way that we have been conducting business, not just today, but this has been the journey for the last few years since we have been given the mandate to come to office. And I certainly stand proud today as we take the break for, which I believe is very deserving of honourable members who have worked tirelessly over the past few weeks, certainly since we have reconvened, to be able to bring not just these pieces of legislation, but several pieces of legislation to this chamber, which we believe are transformational. Mr. Speaker, we don't make legislation for today, but I believe that when we meet as a cabinet, when we meet as part of the parliamentary group, we meet to be able to make legislation for tomorrow, and legislation that will impact the lives of every Barbadian, regardless of which party they support, which class they may come from, and whatever their social status may be. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people who are behind the scenes, who help to fuel us and to make sure that we're able to do the people's business. Certainly the clerks of parliament, all the members of the head table, all of the ancillary staff, all of the catering staff, all of the persons who help to serve us and who prepare the food, the Barbados Police Service, our entire security, and of course my colleagues as well. You, Mr. Speaker, because you have been diligent in ensuring that the rules of the House are often kept. And indeed, the Leader of the Opposition, who has kept us indeed on our toes as well. Sometimes we agree with him, sometimes we don't. And sometimes he seeks to mislead, and sometimes we have to put him in his place. But that is the nature and the cut and thrust of this place. And we do so certainly in the spirit of doing what is in the best interest of the people of this country. Without the people, Mr. Speaker, we could not be here. We are grateful. I think I speak on behalf of all honorable members that we are grateful for the people who sent us here to do the work in their name. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, as I speak on the adjournment, I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 16th of September at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 16th day of September 2025 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, yes, have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until the 16th day of September 2025 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.